Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers, coming to you from my neighborhood, which is this, the Robservatory. Rob, casting at you from the Robservatory. This is episode 435 of Robservations, the show about something. I'm your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you are imagination connoisseurs. You are members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. I like to think of you as the most open-minded and inclusive community on the internet. But before we get started, there's something I want to celebrate. You know, we all know that Jacob Fudge's comic relief is the Robservations, the Burnettwork adopted comic book store. We have proprietary, we have ownership over it from afar. And Jacob is a longtime imagination connoisseur, and we have been supporting his channel. Well, there's other people that we'd like to claim as part of this channel, and I'm going to bestow the Burnettwork's Favorite Couple Award. That's right. We have a favorite couple, and I would like to bestow our Favorite Couple Award to Claude and Candida. Now, Claude is an active member of the Post-Geek Singularity, and Candida and Claude are participants, and they love whining about movies. Our sister show, Elizaviews, whining about movies. And today, my friends, is Claude's birthday. And Claude and Candida sent a video, and I'm going to play it. Well, I'm just going to assume that I'm back on the show. That was really interesting. You know, you just never know. You take it for granted that we have all of this incredible technology, and then suddenly you're just not there anymore. You get a spinning wheel. I mean, sometimes I feel our whole society is one big spinning wheel, but I gave you one. Anyway, what I was going to say, I hope I can play it this time. We shall see.
Okay.
Hola Roberto.
Hola.
Hola Elizabeth. ¿Cómo estás? Just want to say hello. Greetings from Alexandria, Virginia. Friday afternoon, the day before Claude's birthday. So we have a lot to celebrate this weekend.
That means it's his birthday today.
Me personally, I am thoroughly enjoying date night Friday Elizaviews. I enjoyed the other ones as well, especially last night. I think that Elizabeth, you were on fire.
Definitely.
And Roberto, always the gentleman. And Claude doesn't know that I'm going to say all this, but the reason that I'm wearing my Captain Marvel t-shirt is sign of strength. I had a cancer diagnosis last year. All is good. It's behind us. But some difficult times, especially for Claude and Rob. I have to thank you. I have to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I think you pulled him through many a very challenging time. So I didn't even know this until earlier this year, that he watched you all the time, and I think you got him through it. So thank you for that. And I am just thrilled to be now part of the party. So, cheers all
guys.
The best. Look forward to seeing you tonight. And happy birthday.
See you guys.
Bye.
Are they cute or what? That is I'm making them the official couple of Robservations, Claude and Candida. Although I have to say, putting that bottle in the foreground made me envious. I wasn't aware of Candida's cancer. As you can see, many people have asked, why do I have a pink Darth Vader? My mother is a cancer survivor. She had 2 radical mastectomies and survived breast cancer. You've met my mom. You've heard my mom. She's been on the show before. And I bought that Darth Vader, that pink Darth Vader, to support breast cancer research. So that's why I have it. And I'm glad that Candida is here, and it's all going well. And Claude, our man's birthday is today. So happy birthday, Claude. And yes, I'm sure we'll see the both of you tonight on Whining About Movies, Elizabeth. Tonight we are doing The Princess Bride. And I don't know if you saw Elizabeth on the other night's Brick episode, she was on fire. I think the secret to making Elizabeth on fire is not to pour gasoline on her, but to fill her up with a hearty margarita with a little bit of extra, something in there that I made sure she pre-gamed properly. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, as I switch my, I hope there's not wackiness happening. As you well know on this show, this is not a political show, but lately, because of what's been going on, I've been getting political letters and political things. And when I say it's not a political show, I don't delve into the politics of the day. That's not what I'm interested in. However, all of the things that imagination connoisseurs like are all really derived from all kinds of thought, but I think political thought is part of that. Like, for instance, I didn't know when I read Frank Herbert's Dune, Nice Jewish Kid Like Me, I didn't know much about Islam. And I started delving into Islam because of Dune, because a lot of Dune was derived from Islamic thought and Islamic culture, and I didn't know that. And so a lot of when I'm interested in something science fiction-wise or fantasy-wise, it has led me to not necessarily my own political views, but the study of political thought. And I love all of that. And, I've often said, look at a movie like Captain America, the Winter Soldier, which is, it is all about politics. Now, about things like surveillance and freedoms and terror, and what is it our government, what do we want from our government, and what should our government expect from us? Don't ask what you can do for your country, ask what your country can do for you. Or don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I'm always interested in all of that because that's what makes science fiction, fantasy, and horror interesting genres to me, because they can examine things where if you're in talking about them in, say, a normal forum, people would freak out. But one of the reasons that the Twilight Zone and Star Trek, Twilight Zone beginning in the late 50s and early 60s, and then Star Trek into the beginning in the 1966 all the way up through 1969, the reasons those shows still resonate as much today is because through the lens of a science fiction fantasy show, they were able to delve into political issues. And while network standards and practices wouldn't necessarily allow certain things to be talked about on television, what was really neat was that in Star Trek, and especially, Twilight Zone, they could delve into these issues because it was, after all, it's that sci-fi fantasy stuff. And they were able to get away with a lot more. So I've always been interested in all kinds of views as presented in the entertainments we so love. After all, people are like, I don't want politics in my Star Wars. I'm like, wait a minute. Star Wars is about a band of rebels fighting a galactic empire, liberation of the galaxy from tyranny. Its very definitions, the name Star Wars, it is about political thought from the very beginning. And then you're also dealing with within the Jedi mindset or the Sith mindset, all of that. So I've always thought it was sort of strange when we get into these chats about we can't talk about politics. And I'm like, most of the things that we love, look at Game of Thrones. I think one of the reasons Game of Thrones was so fun and so interesting to watch was it was all about the political machinations of what was going on in Westeros. And while, it's not necessarily about our politics, it's about politics in general, and it's fun to look at. Now, as you all know, I like to find my articles. And I thought today, I've got to pull it up because with my little, I don't know what that weird snafu was, but I found what I thought was a really interesting article. And it deals with a topic near and dear to my heart, which is superheroics. And what do, the superhero genre has always, obviously I'm a huge comic book collector, but what do superheroes represent? And what do they represent in times like we're going through right now? And I found a fascinating article. I'm surprised I didn't see this yesterday. It was published yesterday. Let me just wipe off my glasses so I can delve into it. Okay, I'll just do this then. This really interesting article, and I wanted to share it. It's a long one, but worth sharing. Protest backlash and the failings of a super. All right, I hope we're back, and I can get back to this article. Yeah, I don't know. The last couple days on YouTube has been a little sketchy. Strange stuff about going on. So, this article is by Richard Newby, and the title of the article is Protest Backlash and the Failings of a Superhero Culture. America is a culture dominated by superhero stories. Men and women in masks taking their fights to the streets, buildings becoming collateral damage in the struggle for survival. Yet, when black people clad in COVID masks do this in real life for a real cause, that's not aliens or robots, but nothing less than our right to exist. We are labeled criminals, thugs, and terrorists. The destruction of property is given more weight and tears than the destruction of black lives. At the same time, those in the highest levels of government and those inciting violence under the pretense of to serve and protect are coded as heroes by a significant part of the media and the policies that govern this country. They're not heroes because of their actions, but because of their position as authority figures and the inherent racism that exists within the institutions that give them that power. A culture dominated by superhero stories, and we, as a country, still don't understand justice. Over the past 2 weeks, we've been inundated with images and videos from the protests that have swept America following the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor by police officers. Separate incidents in what have become a painfully common occurrence in America. I've been grappling with this over the weeks, on top of struggling with the murder of Ahmaud Arbery in February, on top of struggling with all the murders of black men and women before that. To be black in America is to be caught in a never-ending cycle of struggle and anger, of powerlessness. I've been grappling with my own anger and how others have responded to this anger. I've thought a lot about what justice means in this country, how it is perceived, and how its power is harnessed. And it has led me to believe that America's investment in superhero media has ultimately betrayed us. This isn't a conversation of quality, but of what audiences are taking away from these stories, and how they have, intentionally or not, conditioned too many Americans to misconstrue the plight of African Americans. For nearly 20 years, we've glorified superhero stories on screen. We've watched these images of mostly white costumed heroes dominate our cinemas with increasing demand. But how much of America is really seeing these stories and images for what they are? Rarely does it seem like these characters, who are our biggest commodities with the biggest platforms, have been used to the same degree of social effectiveness that they were in the 1940s. At least, not for the demographics who need them the most. It has become increasingly apparent to me as a black man, not me, but the author of this article. It's become increasingly apparent to me as a black man, especially in the past couple weeks, as non-black people have taken issue with black anger and sought to police our feelings and the methods of our protest, and have muddled our actions with those of opportunists, that there is a vast divide between the American movie-going audiences, a largely white demographic, who clamor for these stories of superheroes, and those who truly understand their message. I have been reading and watching these superhero stories all of my life. I've chronicled, collected, studied them. I've made a career out of it. If these stories are our modern myths, which I consider them to be, then they have to have some impact on our values and the way we live. It has to be more than escapism and easy answers. I'd argue it is not difficult for most Americans to understand why Nazis are villainous. The awareness to that kind of surface-level villainy has been ingrained in us, partly through comic books' continued use of Nazi villains like The Red Skull, Masterman, Captain Nazi, and Paul von Gunther, originally as a means to support the war efforts during World War II, and now as a means to create a clear-cut line dividing good and evil. But Nazis aren't an American burden, and so there's no guilt invested in their villainy. So even now, when social media accounts refer to the alt-right, the KKK, and police as Nazis, sometimes hyperbolically and sometimes not, it lessens the American responsibility and burden. Racism is an American burden, the American burden, that is built within the foundations of the country. It is the evil that is systemic and entrenched in our government and symbols of authority. Look at the footage of the police instigating violence against peaceful protesters, and Trump calling for military force against Americans crying for justice, while holding up a Bible like some kind of perverted bat signal calling for his red-capped MAGA base. It's clear that the police as an institution and the current president of the United States are the villains in this situation. That's difficult for many non-black Americans to grapple with, particularly when it comes to the police, and few can resist the cry of "not all cops." But I'm tired of hearing fables about the good cops, who are no more real to me than the characters conceived of in the pages of comic books. There is a widespread national issue of an inherent racism in policing and a lack of accountability that wouldn't exist if there were good cops. And then this article, Kalen Allen, there's some TikTok videos here that I'll put this article, the link in the live chat. Part of this American desire to cling to the notion of good cops comes from the fact that our superhero movies, even when presenting these masked characters as outsiders and vigilantes, are almost always partnered with the police or some government entity. The language of comic books of good guys and bad guys is coded into the government's language. Last week, Trump retweeted conservative commentator Buck Sexton's statement, "This isn't going to stop until the good guys are willing to use overwhelming force against the bad guys." Footage from last weekend's protests showcased someone dressed in a Batman costume, walking through tear gas. Immediately, social media gravitated to the idea that reality was imitating the climax of Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises, in which Gotham's poor and downtrodden rise up against Bane, the payoff to Jim Gordon's concerns about escalation, brought up at the end of Batman Begins. Again, more video here. But we shouldn't forget that in the movie, those rioters were backed by Gotham's entire police force. Similarly, a man dressed as Joaquin Phoenix's Joker was seen at one of the protests. But as reliant as Todd Phillips' film is on class uprising, it still feels separate from the Black Lives Matter movement, and its appropriation during this time feels like more of an excuse for white people to smash up storefronts and live out some kind of anarchist fantasy. If we go to the other side of the aisle and look at Marvel's comic book offerings, we have the Avengers backed by the NYPD, and the vast majority of those characters, Iron Man, Captain America, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Nick Fury, are tied to the government. Even when the evils embedded within that government are rooted out, like Hydra was in Captain America the Winter Soldier, we once again run into the issues that these stories suggests the opponents of justice come from outside of America, from a Germany of the past, which for all it matters to our real-world threats, might as well be outer space. Seeing white characters fight against white adversaries who, for all intents and purposes, are already defeated, is why representation in these films is such an important issue. When it comes to black superheroism, Black Panther stands out as the most often used example. Even in the midst of these protests, the rapper T.I. called for rioting to end in Atlanta, Georgia, because it was Wakanda. But it isn't, even metaphorically speaking. Wakanda is an African nation, unblemished by slavery, colonization, and a need for reparations. The film, as powerful as it may be in some regards, doesn't aid the perception of the Black Lives Matter cause in America, or validate the anger of African Americans. Even in its role of presenting America with an image of black people to hold on to, it presents an African people on the defensive rather than the offensive. In the film, Wakandans are called upon to defend their country from outside forces, led by a radicalized black man no less. But our current situation in America sees masked black people on the offensive, which is a rarely seen image in our superhero media. So while white people in their COVID masks, camo, and American flag patterns can walk down the street with assault rifles because they want saloons and bars to open, or salons and bars to open, unarmed black people who just want to live are something to fear and villainize, even by the media outlets that should have our backs. For the most part, superheroes are no longer depicted as dangerous, as outsiders with the power to affect the status quo like Superman did in his first appearance in 1938. On screen, many have essentially become cops and feds. Even those characters who once served as allegories for the racial injustice in America, like the X-Men, have become largely embraced and institutionalized. The allegories they were once a part of lost on many Americans who believe that racism and the black fight for civil rights ended in the 1960s. Recently, in his live commentary for Logan, director James Mangold highlighted his complicated relationship with superhero stories, saying, "I love the mythic values of them. They're morality tales of a modern age. But I hate they often reaffirm an idea that God will save us, that we as mortals bear no responsibility for our lives. The movie is, for me, undeniably political, about an age when we hide in consumerism, distracted in fantasy as our real world burns." Mangold's concerns reflect my own. As much as I love these stories, they do little to actually confront the real and present issues humans are facing, and they fail to inspire us to reckon with our behavior, as myths should. It's interesting that the stories that do push against the status quo, that aren't interested in a love affair with cops or government, are the ones that prove to be the most controversial. One of the central reasons Zack Snyder's Superman impacts me, and the many people of color who are fans of that depiction who I've encountered over the years, is because the Superman of Man of Steel and of Batman v Superman, even though coded as white, is an outsider fighting against corruption in a nation that fears him and criticizes his every move and every effort to preserve his own life and those of others. And only when he's dead is his impact felt. HBO's Watchmen, created by Damon Lindelof, presents an even more insightful depiction of how superhero stories matter in terms of racial justice. With the character of the Hooded Justice, a.k.a. Will Reeves, Jovan Adepo and Louis Gossett Jr., respectively, Reeves, a survivor of the 1921 Tulsa race riots, becomes one of the first black cops in New York City, and his discovery that the cops are secretly part of the KKK leads to his lynching and rebirth as a superhero. One who had to hide his race beneath his costume because, once again, black offensive action is something to fear and suppress. But as Reeves tells his granddaughter, Angela, Regina King, who still fights the same fight against cops deeply embedded in the KKK, you can't heal under a mask. Wounds need air. Black Americans can't breathe. We've been choking and wounded for a long time, and we need air. America is in the midst of a true masks-off moment in which people are truly revealing themselves as either allies or not, as part of the movement or not, and as heroes or villains. But the way in which we think of heroism and villainy has to change. Heroes fight for the oppressed. Police and politicians are not oppressed, and they cannot stand against protesters, attack them, fire tear gas and rubber bullets at them, and be seen as heroes. Not anymore. A video of actress and activist Keke Palmer asking the National Guard to march with her and the protesters has been making the rounds over the past couple days. The guardsman says he'll kneel with them, and Palmer says, "That ain't enough for me." I agree with Palmer's sentiment. That's not enough. And if the pop culture that we cling to, that influences our decisions and perceptions during these times of strife, can't find a way to tackle real issues, to tackle institutional racism and police brutality, then their value as morality tales, as myths, as the centerpiece of our pop culture, are not enough. When I look at these superhero stories now in the context of America's racial history and the power they've held over us, I think about Will Reeves' estimation of Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen. Considering what he could do, well, he could have done more. If justice is going to matter in this country, then both our American culture and pop culture have to do more. Now, for those, hang on a second, let's see. For those who are wondering, that was in the Hollywood Reporter, an entertainment news magazine. Now, when I came across that, I again, this article hit me hard, and it's in the Heat Vision section of the Hollywood Reporter, which traditionally reports on comic book news, which is what John Schnepp and I used to do, and John Campea on Collider Heroes. And when I read something like this, I think it's a lot to think about. I am surrounded in this place by thousands of books, thousands of comics, all of this stuff, all of the things that we imagination connoisseurs enjoy. Now, are they political? Perhaps on the surface, perhaps they aren't. But it really depends how you look at them. And I think when Richard Newby can write an article like this, it makes us all stop and think and say, what are the things that we consume? What do they mean to us? What do they mean as far as the larger world around us is concerned? And one of the things, before I made Free Enterprise, Mark Altman and I were writing a script. I had this idea. I wanted to make the ultimate Jewish supernatural thriller. And the same way that, say, Catholicism informed the vampire mythology, I wanted to take a lot of Yiddish folk tales and things like the Golem and the Yeni Welt, the Mirror Realm, and all this stuff that I'd read in Yiddish folk tales and spin it into this frothy mix that would deal with saving the world. How I wanted Leonard Nimoy to play. This is before Free Enterprise. Leonard Nimoy and a bar mitzvah, a boy turning 13, would basically save the world. And it was called Day of Atonement. It's too late to be forgiven. And it was interesting because somebody said to me when I was explaining, I was pitching the plot. They said, you're trying to address the roots of anti-Semitism. And I said, yeah, we're gonna tackle that. And he said, yeah, but in this story, you've made the roots of anti-Semitism supernatural in nature. And basically my premise was that the reason that people hate Jews and have wanted to exterminate the Jews for so long is because the righteous men, the Jewish righteous men, are the only, and there's a certain amount of them, the Lamed Vav, there's a certain amount of them that exist in the world at any one time, but nobody knows who they are. They don't even know who they are. You eliminate them and evil can consume the world. And that was part of the whole script. And this friend of mine was saying, if you do that, you absolve humanity of its responsibility and its of the responsibility of causing the horror. If you were to turn anti-Semitism into something that was supernatural in nature, then you let mankind off the hook. And that was something that never occurred to me. We never made the movie. I mean, I still like the idea, but the central image behind that it was all really this great supernatural evil that's been trying to consume all of mankind, all of humanity, I didn't even think about it. I was too caught up in wanting to use folk tales and make a horror story. And I hadn't even, and I was writing it with Mark, and we hadn't even considered what our story could say in the long run. I mean, we might have even made that whole movie. And if I went to a film festival and somebody had told me, and you're doing a Q&A after the movie and someone raised their hands and asked me that question, I would have been shattered. I would have been destroyed that I had even made that movie without contemplating what that question means. And I think it's really interesting. So whether you agree with Richard Newby's article or not, it is definitely food for thought. There's a lot of very compelling arguments, and there's a lot of things that I think he's absolutely correct on. But I think what's more important about this is it certainly got me thinking. And Even things like comic books that for so long people considered disposable. No one's going to ever go see you can't make an Avengers movie. You can't do that. We have 23 movies now that have each average gross of all 23 movies is $1 billion each if you average out all the money total that these films grossed, which is frankly amazing. But as Richard Newby says in this article, well, what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? And how does that make us look? What do we think that truth, justice, and the American way looks like? It's not just something that Superman was fighting for in the 50s and going back all the way to 1938. So I always think that when people say, Rob, don't get political on the show. Well, you can get political without dividing people. These are all issues to talk about, to mull over. Next time, if they ever open bars again and we can sit down over a pint, these are the kinds of discussions that are worth having. And if you're discussing them in terms of your favorite superheroes and what do they mean in the grand scheme of things, well, that's exactly what Gene Roddenberry and Rod Serling were doing in the 60s. They were trying to tell stories that overtly people could enjoy as science fiction, fantasy, but really there was a lot going on underneath the surface. And people are able to address these issues and maybe make them more palatable instead of screaming at one another about politics when you're discussing politics via the lens of superhero stories. Well then, maybe we can find, a common ground over that, if nothing else. But I do think that this is an interesting article and very much worth reading. And I think you guys should check out the links in it. So I'm going to put this article in the live chat and tell me what you think. And as you know, I am always open to hear other people's stories and what they think. That is the reason this channel exists. Now, I obviously over the last couple days have been deluged with letters. So many letters. And I'm just gonna start and jump into them. Some of them get a little spicy, I have to say. Harlock, Texaria says, Dear RMB, I was sad to bear witness to your online cancellation and even sadder to come across your apology video. Veterans of the culture wars would advise you against the latter. Alas, your apology may have activated a large network of vicious social justice warriors who will harass you and try and cancel your future endeavors. Be vigilant. The rest of your Collider frenemies are but the tip of the iceberg. I'm sending you the link to 4 videos that may inform you on their tactics and your potential future struggles. Still, I pray that no more attacks come your way. I've been getting a lot of letters like that. First of all, I want to thank you for sending them in. But I have to say something about this. There's nothing wrong if you do something. I have a certain standard for myself. And the tweet that I made was done in anger, and it wasn't my best work. And people tried to tell me that, and I was obstinate, and I was like, and then I used really bad language to a coworker. And that was, if nothing else, those two things absolutely demanded an apology. And that's why I apologized. I did not see apologizing as a capitulation to the people at large. But I did apologize, and I regret doing that. I also regret, though, when the tweet that I made, that everybody was all hot and bothered over, was later screen capped and retweeted after I made it without the accompanying video that was part of the original tweet. So all they had were my words. And my words without the original video that I was outraged about in the first place have no context. So and this was after I apologized. It was screen capped and retweeted. So it just looked like I was the ravings of an old man on his lawn screaming and yelling about do violence, kill them all. No, it was very specifically in relation to Captain Dorn dead on a street corner trying to stop his friend's business from being looted. It was not a call to arms. But without that video, it was all it was my words without context. And I think that, you know, that there has to be some responsibility taken for if you're going to go after my words, come after me. Here I am every single day. You can write me letters. We'll discuss it. But if you're going to take my words out of context and push a narrative that is not what I said, well then, that's problematic in itself. So, especially when I've been doing the show now for 435 episodes, and I'm like, let's talk about it. Come here. So look, I was also thinking about the fact that there's a brouhaha that is bubbling over at the New York Times. And a lot of people objected to an editorial that they chose to publish this week. And there's a lot of people have taken up arms on both sides. Now, I was thinking about that. I was reading an article just this morning. The New York Times has a slogan: all the news that's fit to print. And the article is talking about how old school liberal values, and I consider myself a classical liberal, and in the slogan, all the news should be printed. And now there's a younger generation that is a lot more in touch with feelings and how these things affect people's emotions. All the news that's fit to print. So the idea is, I come from the school that all the news, good or bad, should be printed. All of it, both sides. Got to have that battle, whether conservative, whether liberal, right wing, left wing. All of these things need to be discussed. But now we're living in a world where all the news is on one side, that's fit to print is on the other. And I think that's sort of dangerous. I think that we should be able to talk about all of these things. And it takes a maturity, and it takes it takes an adult maturity to sit down and be able to talk. And it's always interesting to me, like whenever I would watch like British Parliament, people like yell and scream at each other in Parliament. You know, they're in the British Parliament, and you don't see that. You don't see that very much in our government. But it's like, I always felt like there was more of an honesty in the British Parliament, where people are like, you're not holding back. You're not pretending to like somebody or pretending to listen to them and not really listen to them. You know, we have a lot of that here. We have a lot of people. There's a lot of people who want to talk about how they're very aware, and they're very liberal, and they have these values, but then they're the first people to go after somebody without really listening to what they've said. And it's very odd. But as anyone knows me for any length of time, this channel is about discussion. And the only thing that I ask is that whenever anybody comes here to discuss something, that you take into consideration there are other people here, and they deserve your consideration with whatever you're going to say. And I would hope that everybody else gives them, if somebody comes to speak and I choose to share their letters or something, I would hope that everybody hears them and considers them. And if you want to speak, also that you respect everybody else that's here. That's it. And I have to say, look, if you've been here and listened to these letters, I get the best letters on the internet. My community, you guys, you imagination connoisseurs, have kept the discussion and discourse on this channel. Well, we go to 11. Like David St. Hubbards would say in Spinal Tap. This goes to 11. The discussion on this channel and the letters you guys write in is absolutely 11. And we don't have to make 11 that much louder. Richard Stock is here. Richard Stock says, hey there, Rob, and everyone in the community. Let's see. I already read this article. I read this letter the other day. I apologize for that. There's so many, it's hard to keep track. Emil Johansson is here. Emil says, your recent stories about you-know-what have made me pissed. Not at you. I do think you said something stupid, and I can understand people reacting to that. I don't want to write angry letters to Sen or the Fandom Entertainment or Collider. I don't want to trash them and tell them they're morons If they want to put you out on a timeout, they have a right to do so. What I am pissed about are all these so-called purity tests that seem to have become standard all of a sudden. I know what you said. I've heard you read the Twitter exchange you had with Clark Wolf that apparently was enough for her to call you a misogynist. And honestly, this entire situation is ridiculous. I'm so sick and tired of people acting morally superior and then being so sensitive to any joke people make or any opinion they have that they don't agree with. What's wrong with people? I'm not used to this. I'm used to people having way more extreme opinions, doing way worse things, and getting away with them. There are people who have built careers on hurting other people's feelings. They take pride in that people cheer them on. Yet, you actually had to apologize for a stupid tweet you made because someone thought you were being racist or sexist, which, by the way, is an objective lie. I want to be very clear. Emil said that. I didn't. I want to be very clear on how the world works. Right now, there are people so mad they ignore the warnings of corona. They steal, destroy, and kill people under the guise of being against police brutality and systemic racism. This is beyond stupid and shouldn't be tolerated. But does that mean I'm on the other side? The people who think racism doesn't exist? That Floyd was a single incident that had nothing to do with anything? Absolutely not. No disrespect to Jim Boyers, but as some people know by now, I'm not a fan of police, and I'm really bothered by all the shootings they do, and not just in your country. But the fact is, this shows there are two polarized sides, rioters and law enforcement, that are completely opposing each other, and yet none of them stand for some kind of ultimate morality. That's the truth. Nobody's good, even though they're completely different. My point is, there is not right and perfect opinion. There are police who murder innocent people and get away with it. There are looters who think they're on the right side of history because they genuinely believe they're protesting something evil. But until people realize that people have vastly different worldviews and there is no ultimate moral compass that everybody needs to agree upon, we're never going to make any progress. The real world is tough, and it's complicated. The fact that I had to grow up with people being assholes all the time and getting away with it, and now I see people being upset with ridiculous tweets that have nothing to do with anything, so much they exclude you completely from their lives because of some sense of morality I apparently can't comprehend, makes me furious. And again, I don't agree with you. I don't think anyone needs to include you in their group if they don't want to, but I think these people have some kind of moral standard that makes them better than others, and that pisses me off. It's a lie to anything that's real. Thank you for reading my letter. Well, Emil, you are a longtime imagination connoisseur, and I like hearing. And you're not an American. You're sending these letters from across the pond, and it's always interesting to get that kind of a perspective. Oh, this is a good letter, and this is why I love this community, because you just never know. Look at how we're jumping around today. Hello, Mr. Burnett and the fellow Post-Geek Singularity, where I'm known by the moniker Eyes on the Wire. I'd like to briefly spotlight one of my favorite films of all time, 1989 Santa Sangre by eccentric writer-director Alejandro Jodorowsky. Man, this would be a great whining about movies movie. At the time I became aware of its existence, I was immediately interested. After searching the interwebs, it was clear that the only way for me to see this film was to hunt down the Blu-ray release by Severin and buy it off of eBay. I have that. An action I never take with movies. But this film called to me, as I'll explain, and boy, was it worth the inconvenience. Jodorowsky is best known for his 1970s films Holy Mountain and El Topo, and also his Dune adaptation that never got made. I implore the Post-Geek Singularity to check out the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune. It chronicles the spectacular art and vision he had and created for the adaptation of H.R. Giger of Alien fame, one of the ultimate what could have beens in movie history. Santa Sangre is arguably his most accessible film, it is, and one that is recommended as an introductory gateway drug for the Chilean master. But that's not to say the film is easy viewing. The film's narratives, rich with flashbacks of childhood, religious conflicts, sanatoriums, trauma, including tattooed women and knife-throwing ringmasters. The atmosphere created is pregnant with the weird and surreal, a lived-in world that only Jodorowsky could conjure and normalize. Inspiration can be felt from the works of Fellini and Luis Buñuel, but this film has an unpredictability and edge that is uniquely its own. I don't know where else you can watch a solemn funeral procession for an elephant with clowns, mimes, midgets, and sideshow freaks done so earnestly that it's simultaneously beautiful, believable, and heartbreaking. I think with most films, it's best to go in blind without a plot synopsis. View the trailer and see if it tickles your fancy or not. Perhaps my high praise of this movie and affinity for circus culture can be attributed to my mother's side of the family being of Hungarian Romani stock. For centuries, my gypsy ancestors practiced fortune-telling and tarot card readings at caravans, fairs, and circuses, but that long tradition died with my grandmother in the 1990s. To honor my heritage, I began doing readings last year. But I digress. Also, tangentially related, if it wasn't for Hurricane Katrina, where I joined the Red Cross to help rebuild New Orleans, I was going to be a traveling photographer for Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. Yet another what could have been. In any case, I think fans of the weird and the eerie should give Santa Sangre a chance. It's an interesting Frankenstein's monster of a movie, equal parts surreal, haunting, and beautiful. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's certainly unique and worth a watch. The film is currently free from Amazon Prime Video with a Fandor trial. Great article, man. Great recommendation, David. I can't agree with you more. I love Santa Sangre. I saw it in the theater. I thought it was just. I mean, it's definitely an experience. Peak Jodorowsky. But you're absolutely right. Like, if I was going to tell somebody, what do you think about Alejandro Jodorowsky? I don't know if I would say, you should watch The Holy Mountain and El Topo. I would say watch Santa Sangre first, because it gets weirder from there. And you're absolutely right about that. So great recommendation. Great recommendation. This one comes from Neil Cole. Rob, I saw you first on John Campion. I've only watched him for the last few months, so the whole YouTube channel viewing thing is new to me. However, I watched Robservations from the UK, being a huge Star Trek fan, and I admire your opinion on many areas, especially Picard, although I still liked it even though you were bang on with the criticisms. My point is, I never subscribe or comment to anything, but I've been so incensed with the total fuckwits giving you grief over a single set of tweets I had to mail you. Let's face it, even though you can't say it online, most people messaging are pretty ignorant of reality, and I bet generally not much of an idea about politics, dynamics, or history of the world at large. I'm a historian, political junkie, news addict, and general geography geek. These Muppets throw out their dumb shit comments, but I wanted to say, please stop apologizing. You did nothing wrong other than make a comment. If people don't like it, that's their right. But seriously, F if they can't accept someone who has a different opinion. Twitter to me is a bucket of cack, even at the best of times. Anyone can have an opinion, but it is a rational, informed opinion. Usually not. So just move on. Ignore the idiots that make a comment with no evidence to back it up. They're not worth a second of your time. You're a good guy. I watch you. F the haters. Well, thank you, Neil. Listen, again, I apologized because it was a bad tweet. And my meaning was not conveyed correctly. And people took the wrong thing from it. I mean, you know, I apparently have had all of the episodes that I was in of Inglorious Trexperts were removed. Inglorious Trexperts is executive produced by Dean Devlin, who produced Independence Day. I would go to his office with my friends that I've had for 30 years. One of them is a producer I'm working with now. And all of my episodes were removed. Now, I would think anybody who's a lifelong Star Trek fan, the idea that being branded a racist of some kind is patently ridiculous, but that's the world we live in. And that's what's happened. And, you know, I have to live with those consequences, but yes, I think you're right. And what's interesting is boys, people sure were quick to, I mean, this happened so fast, and I apologize, but, you know, then my tweet was screen capped and again, blasted out over and over again without the original video where my outrage was focused. So it looked like the ravings of somebody that was calling for violence, which was pretty ridiculous, to be honest. And anybody that watches this channel knows I'm just the opposite of that. Anyway, this one comes from Jared Snyder. Thank you for writing in, though. I appreciate it. Dear Robert, please know that even for the casual viewer like myself, the Burnettwork and Robservations is something of real value to all of us here. Listening to you talking about the support you've received from people like Jeremy over Geeks and Gamers, who hold such different political views than you, made me think about the power of our shared myths. Myths are what bind humans together. When myths are shared, we see our common humanity instead of our differences of opinion. We, the imagination connoisseur, may not always be the storyteller, sometimes sitting next to the teller of tales, prompting them and anticipating what comes next. An equally important role. We need our myths now more than ever. Star Trek is meant to show us what opportunities are open to us if we can overcome the prejudices that hold us back, if we can find a new myth that allows us to reach to the stars together and equally. I fear that we are instead witnessing the intentional destruction of collective myths, fracturing instead of uniting us. So how have we defined the myth? The one that can unify us and let us move to the promise encapsulated in the words, "We the people." A myth that applies to the meaning of those words to everyone, not just some of us, because otherwise, as James T. Kirk says, they mean nothing. Keep up the great work, Jared. Well, Jared, thanks for writing in. Nice letter. And I have to say, bonus points to you for referencing the Omega Glory, an episode that can be frequently mocked, but it was written by Gene Roddenberry himself. So way to go on that. I agree with you. And that's why it's interesting having this letter come in on the same day I read that article, because the power of myth is what all of those things are all about. Brian Eng is here. Brian says, "Hi, Rob. I can't wait to meet you in person so you can give me the Collider dirt. Last year, I asked my wife if we could go to London so I could meet a YouTuber." For those of you who don't know, I still want to do this. I went to London to see Skyfall because it opened 2 weeks. I'm a huge Bond fan. It opened 2 weeks earlier there, and I wanted to go see No Time to Die, mostly because I wanted to get our moderator, Detective Jim Boyers, who doesn't have a passport, to go to London. But anyway, she wasn't so sure because she thought you were a hot babe. I told her, "You're a cis white male with one foot in the grave." She said, "Okay then." Of course, that didn't happen. I also thought I'd meet you here in Cleveland for Elizabeth's high school reunion. I would have bought your ticket to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if you're interested. Of course, that didn't happen either. One day, Rob, one day. Another Collider question, if you don't mind. Towards the end, John seemed to be featuring Coy a lot. Was there a succession plan? I don't think so. People have asked me. It never brought up ever to me, because John and I were doing Collider together. Obviously, we were doing Heroes together, and we were planning on doing shows outside of Collider when he passed away. And I know that John wanted to step away from Collider and start doing his own thing, as I think a lot of people do. John had a lot going on. There was a lot happening in his life, and it was very unfortunate. But when John passed away, I was content on Collider to be a guest. I liked being a guest on that show, and I had no interest in running it. And to be clear, I really liked working with both Amy Dallin and Coy. I respect them both. And Coy is, he's just a ball of energy. What you see is what you get. I really love being around him. And Amy was so smart and so knowledgeable, especially in the comic book world, that I really enjoyed working with them. And, but when John left, he was the one who brought me on the show. I was on for 3.5 years, and things were a little weird by no fault of my own, I have to say. Things were just, it was a tough time all the way around, losing John like that. But, there was no plan for succession, and I certainly was not interested. At the time, I had no interest in doing running a show. I mean, John had to do work for that show, and I'm like, I don't want to work. I love just rolling in, like with the Schmodown. I would just roll in, do my thing, and roll out, and I didn't have to think too much about it. Oh, this letter is the best. I love this letter. Megas of Vacanti writes in, "Hello, Mr. Burnett. I've pestered you on Twitter previously, so before I somehow manage to make things any worse, I may as well introduce myself. Well, who I am at the moment isn't important. A long time ago, someone called me a guy from the internet, and that seems to be the best moniker to stick on me right now. In any case, I have a hate for small talk and proclamations that mean nothing. It's a struggle enough to provide sufficient context to long-form content like this, so let me just skip the preamble. Today, I am here to talk about Kamen Rider Kuga, a series that I just finished literally a few minutes before sitting down to type this. Though it's taken me a couple of weeks to actually finish it seems. I'm sort of like that. Kuga's history is an interesting one. It came 6 years after a number of successive failures to take the franchise both into the Heisei area. Okay, I should say Kamen Rider was one of the first Japanese superheroes. I actually have a quarter scale Kamen Rider first generation figure from that Enterbay made. It's awesome. So it's not quite Power Rangers, but it's in that realm. The period, the Heisei area, the period beginning January 1989, running through April 2019. Kamen Rider Black RX actually ended in the previous Showa era, but it ended in '89. And the 21st century of the Roman calendar with an abortive pilot film and 2 different event movies. And 2 years after the tragic passing of Kamen Rider's esteemed creator, Shotaro Ishinomori. Originally touching on the 1960s fear of surgery and implants, Ishinomori's Kamen Rider was by and large themed on individualism against collectivism, cyborgs heroically standing their ground against monstrous, sociopathic collectivists who remodeled these people against their will, intending to use them as simple brainwashed weapons in their arsenal before they escaped and rebelled, using their powers to fight back and protect humanity. His vision of Kamen Rider was grounded more in themes resembling a comic book sort of aesthetic, Ishinomori himself being a classic mangaka than that of reality. Note that I love the Showa era Rider as much as the Heisei area Rider, but for very different reasons that are beyond the scope of this text. It is interesting to explain what Kamen Rider was originally like because, for certain recurring themes, it was drastically different. What came after and what later writers did with their own shows was almost as different. Kuga is a unique entity, an inflection point in which the entire future changed. When the opening declares a new hero, a new legend, in English, they weren't kidding. This was the first TV series to be produced in the Heisei area, starting from zero without Ishinomori to guide them. To understand the route Kuga ended up taking, you have to understand the concept of civilization and what being civilized entails. What is civilization? A contract made with fellow sentients to not violate each other's spaces and live as equals, and above all, not harm one another. It's really the best solution to existence, the product of our intelligence, and no viable alternatives have been thought up without civilization. We have the jungle and death that lurks in the jungle, where the concept of respect for one another goes out the window in favor of jockeying for position amongst an infinitely perceived pecking order, where everyone's position, livelihood, and life are up for grabs. And it's easier to destroy rather than to create. Most people hold that primal instinct at arm's length. Sometimes closer. We've seen those raw instincts firsthand, akin to that of beasts or worse, in sharp, mindless destruction and even lethal measure quite recently. This killer instinct and a civilized person's fight against it are what Kamen Rider Kuga is built upon. In the broadest strokes, it's the story of one pillar of civilization holding back the tide of savagery. The scenario may have been inspired by the horrific Shinrinko subway gassings 5 years prior, which by themselves seemed savage and senseless to the majority of Japan, and it didn't help that Shoko Asahara was not the most stable of personalities, coupled with his own warped agenda. It's an incident that Japanese society did not soon forget. And so you have the Gronji. The Gronji are the jungle incarnate, monsters with horrific powers who compete amongst themselves and hunt humans, more akin to outright slaughter, by the tens and even hundreds, for little more than bragging rights and progression to the next round in some kind of warped tournament. Each Gronji follows confusing rules in their mass murders. Early on, one of them speaks to humans about how fun the game they're playing, or Gageru, in the Gronji tongue. Yes, this show gives them a very extensive language, is to them. They only see the average human as prey, something to remove to increase a tally. Worse, they can seemingly walk amongst human society in human form so as not to attract any suspicion. Kuga's story is an ensemble cast, mostly involving Japanese police departments and experts who are faced with the invasion of the Granji, whom they refer to as unidentified life forms. Every desperate hunt for the next Granji is, in a microcosm itself, an application of intellect against chaos. Very much a police procedural, if you can believe it. I'm in, man. I haven't seen this show, but I am in. The police constantly fight to determine the game of the next ULF before more people die, and they often don't succeed. The Gageru continues in spite of them, and the results can often be grim, though not without any lack of trying. And then there's Kuga himself, the hub upon which the entire cast spins. A freewheeling adventurer named Yusuke Godai, who gets biomechanically fused with an ancient belt found at the site of the Granji's origin, made by the Linto, the first civilization the Granji preyed upon. In short order, he becomes the only living being able to reliably destroy them. The audience doesn't actually know much about the Yasuki himself at first, and he surprisingly isn't the focus of the story. We only get clues as to his personality and motives from the people he's interacted with, and those begin sparse. The main cast is actually introduced and presented through his interaction with friends and family at first, then new friends made through interactions during police cooperation. Most of the story is told through them, not Yasuki. They have all very fleshed out backgrounds and quirks. Care was put into them. Even many of the victims get their own story arcs. Outwardly, Yatsuki himself certainly has an infectiously positive attitude, smiling no matter the cost, encouraging people to never give up. He chooses to be a beacon of hope and fights for the smiles of others, which is what Kamen Rider in the Showa era came down to as well. You learn right from the beginning that he has an impressive 1,999 skills on his resume, with a long-seated desire to learn 2,000 before the year 2000. The last one, of course, ends up as being his ability to transform into the Kuga. You only see a fraction of these in the show, but enough to know that they certainly exist. In many ways, he seems larger than life, though you soon come to realize that his bright face conceals an internal struggle, and the audience can only guess at that. And then Kuga becomes more powerful, almost frighteningly so. This gradually becomes a serious cause for concern. In the Showa era, there wasn't much separating the heroes from the villains, because those Kamen Riders were really the same as those villains from a physical perspective. Altered humans, many even altered by the villains themselves. But the Granji are beasts, living weapons. What separates us from them? What is the boundary that prevents us from losing our humanity? Is humanity doomed to meet the same fate? The show leaves you with that question well after the denouement. The writing is fantastic, the acting is fantastic, everything is characterized with true sincerity, it's filmed almost like a documentary, and you wouldn't ever believe it's a show for teenagers about a cyborg bug man fighting beast men in loincloths. Gods, that oversimplification sounded disgusting, but I hope you see my point. I'll leave it there. Kamen Rider Kuga carries my highest recommendation. As an introduction to Kamen Rider and the format of tokusatsu in general, you could very easily do worse. It's available in its entirety on Shout Factory TV with English subtitles, in addition to the subtitles for the Granji outlined in white, that even its initial Japanese run and releases didn't gain the benefit of. So that language remained untranslated for quite a while, leaving the audience to discover the secret of it themselves. Keep this piece of trivia well in mind as you watch. Also, make sure to pay attention to the opening sequence, as it changes very slightly every episode until, well, you'll see. And I guarantee you'll never look at a thumbs up or a blue sky the same way again. Yeah, you see, I'm no good at long-form communication, much as I'm not with forum posts and email, but I thought I'd take a shot, and I hope it hasn't bored or confused you too much. Thanks for putting up with me. I'll be around on Twitter. Look for me around the corner. Megas of Vacanti. Well, let me tell you, Megas, this is the best letter I've ever received about Kamen Rider, and I want to thank you for that. I mean, how often do I get such insightful letters? But you made me want to see it. Your letter succeeded in making me want to see it. So congratulations to you. Now, let's see what people are saying over in the chat here. Where was I? Let's see. Boy, let's go back. Fortunato, this was from, Fortunato, I think I missed this yesterday. Fortunato sends a tip and says, "Hi RMB, what exactly is the fandom menace? Well, it's very interesting because I'm friendly with people from Fandom Menace channels. I have been labeled part of the Fandom Menace of late. But I believe, and I'm not, because I'm not part of the Fandom Menace, I don't want to speak for them, but it is a large group of channels that I see as people that want to bring greatness back to our entertainment. Ultimately, they want good Star Wars, they want good Doctor Who, they want good Star Trek, they want great comics. They're fighting against what they perceive to be social justice warriors and this virtue signaling and all that kind of stuff. Now, I became aware of them because there were certain channels that I would watch, mostly about Star Trek. That's how I discovered Midnight's Edge, and also Gary Beekler, Nerdrotic. And I started watching those guys even before I was on YouTube. I watched their videos, and I would watch videos, and I like them. Like Midnight's Edge, I like their sort of long form deep dive videos, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, what I find interesting is that I look at YouTube. I mean, there's so many things when I skip around. I don't focus on any one. Like I just look at things I'm interested in, and just like I'm interested in most things, so I zip around. And it wasn't until later that I found out that there was some kind of schism between people. But I have to tell you, I have always been welcome there, and it's been interesting to me because, like, for instance, Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, we are diametrically opposed on the political spectrum. But he reached out to me once and said, "Hey, come on my show." And I'm like, okay. And I didn't know that Jeremy had pissed people off or things he'd said. He was very nice to me, very cordial to me, and I thought we had a really interesting conversation because Jeremy he's a geek and he's a gamer. And I'm like, all right. And so I think that I talk to a lot of different people, and that's the Fandom Menace. I think they have been branded. I mean, there's a lot of very extreme voices, as there are everywhere. There's extreme voices everywhere on every side of the aisle. And I'd like to think that when I go on to a channel that people might say, "Rob, why'd you go onto the channel?" that I try and have constructive conversations with everybody, and I try and keep it on to the fan tip. Like, let's talk about why we like all of this stuff. We're all imagination connoisseurs, so that's what the Fandom Menace is. Look, there are people that criticize me for going on these channels, and then I've never been treated anything less than respectfully. And I mean, I guess it's because, like, I've been going to conventions my whole life, science fiction conventions, since I was a little kid. And I've heard a lot of crazy shit at science fiction conventions, crazy discussions and crazy things that happen, and people from all walks of life. And because I had a career when I was younger working in retail and working with the public, I quickly, I think a skill that I developed was I was able to talk to anybody. There was nobody I wouldn't talk to. Yeah, and if they had opinions that I completely diametrically was opposed to, I would still be respectful and cordial and try and learn something about them and put that away for next time. But when you go up a fan and you go to conventions and you go to comic book stores and you go to these kinds of things, you learn very quickly how to deal with all kinds of people. And as long as people are cordial to me and nice to me, I'm happy to talk to anyone. I mean, it's very funny that everybody's being tarred and feathered with these brushes. Like, I mean, I'm being called a racist online, which is like, that's so diametrically opposed to everything that I am about. And I'm called that by people that don't even know what I do or know anything about me. And just like when people get called misogynistic or called, there's no, when you read a book, there's all kinds of characters, there's all kinds of points of view, and there's all kinds of, like, there was somebody, like, I found out, I've said on this channel that my characters, like, that I told you, I've said on this channel since the very beginning, one day somebody is going to come after me. They're going to make a point of the fact that that I have an Alex DeLarge action figure, and they're going to when I was thinking about a Schmodown team, the name the Burning Droogs was what I came up with, and we're supposed to be a loudmouthed heel team. Now the Droogs are horrible. You know, they're a horrible gang, and there are people going, how could you, now that all this brouhaha has happened, the people that are coming after me for my love of Clockwork Orange or whatever are looking at me that I like the Droogs because it glorifies, you know, this kind of behavior. And let me be clear, A Clockwork Orange is one of my favorite movies of all time. But A Clockwork Orange, its fundamental question that it asks, and it asks of an audience, is, as a human being, is it better to have your free will stripped away from you in order to be programmed to only do good? Or is it better to have free will and use that free will and choose to do evil? If you have free will and you can make a choice to do good or do bad, it's more important to have free will than it is to not have free will and be forced to only be good. I mean, in a nutshell, it's about a lot more than that. But that's the central question. It's a debatable question, and I love the film. It's a classic. It was nominated for Best Picture. Is there a lot of problematic stuff in there? Yes. Is it presented in a very problematic way for people now? Yes, by design. A Clockwork Orange is a movie for adults, made by an adult, that asks very adult questions. And to paint it or tar and feather the film because it has very problematic depictions in it is to not do yourself or the film or Stanley Kubrick, the director, justice. So anyway, that was a long answer to that question. The Wakandan Forever is here. Hi, Rob. I'm a fan from the John Campea Show. I felt I needed to come over and visit your show today, just in case you had any doubts. I wanted to say we fans at the John Campea Show support you and are looking forward to seeing you return to the show. Well, thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Willow says, who is your favorite live-action iteration of Batman? A bit controversial, but I loved Batfleck in Batman v Superman. I didn't care for his more jokey portrayal in Justice League. I loved Ben Affleck as Batman in Batman v Superman. Now, I have to tell you, I mean, I might have to agree with you, Willow. I thought as the character was written in that film, I wanted to see more. I desperately wanted to see a full-on Ben Affleck Batman movie. And my favorite things, I mean, I love from the first moments of that film, I love the first moments of Batman v Superman when you're seeing the results of the battle for Man of Steel and we meet Ben Affleck's Batman. I loved Ben Affleck's Batman. Loved him. I did like Christian Bale a lot, but I would say to me, I really liked Bruce Wayne, and I really like Batman as played by Ben Affleck. He might be my favorite of the modern Batman. I mean, I really did like that character. I don't think that's controversial at all. And I didn't like what they did to him in Justice League. I didn't. You could tell from the trailers that they were going in a different direction, and then when you finally see the movie, it's not. It wasn't nearly as cool. Nathan Taylor's here and sends in a tip and says, I just wanted to update you on my message the other day. Last night I saw Jaws at my local cinema, and it was all kinds of awesome. A dream come true. Nathan wrote and said he was going to see Back to the Future and Jaws at his local cinema, and he hadn't seen either one on the big screen. And I said, you really haven't experienced Jaws till you see it on the big screen, because you realize Spielberg's composition and what a master he is at moving his camera. And oh my God. I really don't want to dwell. Then we go to Dan V. Dan V says, I really don't want to dwell on this much more, but Jay and Winston claimed on a stream that it was wrong for you to post the David Dorn video since they and others have seen enough dead black people on video. I'm sorry, but that is a straw man argument. It was a way to ignore a real issue and is insane. I just find that wrong. Jay then reiterated John Campea is a racist because he didn't think Black Panther should be nominated for Best Picture, which is very weak. Campea said to nominate Spider-Verse. So, wait a minute. So, Jay Washington said that John is a racist because he thinks that Into the Spider-Verse should have been nominated another movie about a person of color? Should be nominated over Black Panther? Look, all this stuff is so out of hand. It's so weird. Dan goes on to say, that doesn't count with Jay, though, for whatever reason, when John Campea called Spider-Verse the best superhero film of 2008. Jay also advocated for a black man to play Boba Fett instead of a Kiwi from New Zealand. It's just a toxic mindset that I'm not behind. Well, you know, I keep getting told, I haven't seen any of this, but I you know, look, again, everybody should have their opinions. I mean, I don't understand the whole thing about Boba Fett. I mean, it is a Pacific Islander, is a Kiwi. I don't know if, I think Tamora Morrison is Maori. It's just like, it's all so strange to me. I don't understand. I really don't understand these distinctions. I mean, look, I liked Black Panther a lot, but I wouldn't have called it Best Picture material. Whereas I think that Into the Spider-Verse was, I'd never seen a movie like that before, you know? And this is coming from somebody that loves Black Panther. Hell, I bought the Hot Toys Throne of Wakanda. I have a Shuri figure. You know, a white middle-aged man like me buying an action figure of a beautiful, smart, young black scientist. Somebody might say, that's a little creepy, Rob, but come on, it's Shuri. And by the way, in my display, Shuri is actually sitting on the throne of Wakanda because she's a queen in my book. And why don't where's the Okoye action figure? Anyway, I don't know why Hot Toys has not made Okoye. Can somebody make me an Okoye figure? I want the Dora Milaje. I want like Dora Milaje troops, and I want Okoye. But anyway, I do have Killmonger, and I do have T'Challa, and I didn't get T'Chaka though. I need to get T'Chaka. Yeah, it was a way to ignore a real issue and is insane. You know, I have to say, I didn't post that video. I retweeted that video. I mean, I saw that video, and I can understand that, but, you know, I retweeted that video because it was horrible. But I agree with Jay in the sense that I'm tired of seeing snuff videos of black men killed in America. We've seen, I mean, 3. That's why we're in this situation. And then there was the woman also that was killed that we talked about earlier. I mean, come on, man. I mean, when is enough enough? We should all be outraged. But yeah, I think that's a little odd when we're talking about, I mean, if you're being branded a racist because you say that Black Panther isn't good enough to be a Best Picture winner, and you do love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is about another character of color in the lead role, that's nuts to me. I don't understand where that comes from. Jason Gallagher sends in a super chat and says, by the way, I love Jay Washington, just so you know. I mean, whenever I see him, you know what Jay Washington does? Jay Washington gives good hugs. He gives good hugs. If you ever get an opportunity to get a hug from Jay Washington, you should, because his hugs are warm and full of heart. So that's what I would say about Jay. Let's see. Dan Weiss goes on to say, Jason Gallagher said, stay strong, Rob. You're one of the good guys. Big hello from an Irish lad living in Switzerland. Oh, man, what's it like to be an Irish lad living in Switzerland? That's got to be fun. I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's got to be fun. Do you ski? Have you gone to Davos? Anyway, you got to check that out. Dan V goes on and says, that doesn't count with Jay, though, for whatever reason, when Campea called Spider-Verse the best superhero film of 2018. Oh, you already said that. Jay also advocated blah, blah, blah. I don't understand why. Tamora Morrison, I've been in New Zealand, and Maori culture is very interesting. And, like, there's also some really interesting movies about Maori culture, and I would suggest, if anyone's interested in New Zealand or Maori culture, you should watch a movie called Utu. It's a historical movie directed by Jeff Murphy, who directed The Quiet Earth, and he was a second unit director on Lord of the Rings. And also check out a movie with Tamora Morrison called Once Were Warriors. Check that out. Amazing movies. Dan V goes on to say, worms in Siberia, frozen for 42,000 years, have wriggled to life. Where have I seen that movie? Burn it all. Ooh, yeesh. I don't know. I'm going to put this in the chat. Is that true? 42,000-year-old worms are coming to life? Man, I don't know, man. I don't know. This is not good. I'm not happy. Not happy. Anyway, not happy about that. That's a little frightening. Claudius is here, the birthday boy. Claudius himself. Claudius says, wow, thanks to the birthday wishes, Candida and I started watching just in time. Well, I'm glad. Did you see, like, when I first tried to play your video, everything just went bzzz. Always great to have you guys. I can't wait to sit down and actually have a bottle of wine, or 2 or 3, and scotch, with the two of you, which would be delightful. I hope you're having a good birthday. Can you go out anywhere? Like, do you get to go do anything? I know you're in the Air Force, but I don't know. Do you fly? Like, on your birthday, would they let you take out, like, could you take out, like, an F-16? Or is that a Navy plane? No. No, Air Force, right? Strike Eagle? You could take one out. It'd be so great. Yes, I'd like to go borrow a... that would be my dream. Dan V sends in another tip and says, the majority of people, according to multiple polls, are in favor of the National Guard getting involved. Twitter is not real life. If it was, with the people I follow, including your now former colleagues, Warren gets the nom with ease, but she had no shot. Yeah, I know. It's weird. It's weird. I don't... Look, militarizing the streets of America, that's a dangerous thing to do. And I don't know how I feel about it. Lancelot Narayan sends in a tip and says, hey, man, missed the beginning of the show. Where the hell did you get that shirt? I need one. Stay cool forever, man. Lancelot X. This shirt was made for me by Geek Santa. Geek Santa made this for me. Cliff Stevenson. My man Cliff. He made this shirt for me, which I think is great. I love this shirt. And I guess you could sell them. I don't know. Maybe you could make more. Stub McShave sends in a tip and says, politics is not always exciting, but political intrigue is always interesting. It's, wait for it, intriguing. Look, I love politics. I love, you know what? I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is the original Manchurian Candidate. Actually, Jonathan Demme's remake with Denzel Washington's pretty good too. But the original with Frank Sinatra and Lawrence Harvey and Angela Lansbury, oh my God, one of my favorite movies of all time. And wow. And it's political. Jason S. says, the writer of that article must think we're all idiots by him claiming mass rioting, looting, and arson is peaceful protesting. Next, he'll gaslight us by claiming gang rape is a form of peaceful protesting and that the president should let it continue. Oh, come on now, Jason. I don't think that's what he was saying at all. I don't think that he was saying that rioting, looting, and arson is peaceful protesting. And go back. I would just say the article. I did put the link to it in the chat. So check it out. But I don't think that he was saying that, and I don't think anybody would say let that continue. Caraface says, Rob, remember number 6 being labeled unmutual and disharmonious in the episode A Change of Mind. Ooh, wow. That is a deep cut. And I love that Caraface is talking about one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Patrick McGowan's The Prisoner. Talk about one of the great political shows. Again, like Clockwork Orange, it's a movie about identity. I will not be debriefed. It's so great. If you guys haven't seen The Prisoner or don't know what it is, yes, there was a remake with Ian McKellen. You got to go back and watch the original with Patrick McGowan from '68. Yes, number 6 being labeled unmutual and disharmonious. I love that. Stubble McShave says, hi, Rob, have a drink for the anniversary of D-Day. That's right, today is D-Day. And then have a drink for our national holiday here in Sweden. Well, Stubble, I have a Starship IPA. We had Memorial Day, but I think we should all drink if you've got something to drink. Let's drink to D-Day and everyone who lost their lives there and what it meant for the rest of the world. So, And your national holiday here in Sweden, it's celebrating the crowning of a king in 1523, which was the first step to kicking Denmark's ass. Apologies to all the Danish bastards. Well, I will drink for you. I know Swedes. I will drink to your national holiday, Stubble. And by the way, I've been to Denmark, and I love Denmark. And I never thought anybody there was a Danish bastard, for the record. Eyes on the Wire is here. Hello, Eyes on the Wire. I like your letter. Do you think that critically acclaimed classic films like Vertigo will eventually get a 4K release? Oh my God, from your mouth to God's ears. Yes, please. Please, we need Vertigo, ladies and gentlemen. We need Vertigo on 4K. They will, eventually. I'm hoping so. I mean, I'm really excited. Lawrence of Arabia next week. Lawrence of Arabia on 4K. Bill Hunt told me what the bit rate is and said it's off the chain. Very excited. And Doctor Strangelove on Blu-ray. I cannot wait. I think it will. I think the Hitchcock movies will, at least. Austin Hernandez, my man Austin here. Augie sends in a super chat and says, Rob, thank you for being you. I'm here for the community you built. Your insight on movies, your opinions, your views. I've been entertained and I've learned a lot. Your courage and openness inspires me. Well, I appreciate you saying that. But I want to thank you and thank everybody else for being also a part of this community. I mean, I know I can count on people that in the middle of a pandemic, they will find me toilet paper. And then I get to draw, which I still have a video I got to put up of that. But not of me using toilet paper, about me traveling through the city to get some toilet paper, thanks to our imagination connoisseurs. Alexander Wilson is here. Alexander, I did, by the way, send another email about Quinn Snyder, and I will keep you informed, sir. Alexander Wilson sends in a tip and says, no organization has moved race relations and race laws in the USA than the Los Angeles Brooklyn Dodgers. Researching legend Sandy Koufax, who is Jewish, didn't pitch Game 1 of the '65 World Series because it fell on Yom Kippur. It was controversial. Your thoughts? Well, you know what? I like Sandy Koufax that he had those kinds of convictions. You have to respect, again, I think that's great. I think it's great. I didn't know I think one of the things, like, we always look at sports now, it's kind of become controversial, but the strip away the owners and the coaches and the money and all that. I do believe that at some point, because we grow up playing sports and everything, when they call baseball the great American pastime, when you're playing sports with your fellow teammates, it's really, you become, there's a camaraderie there. And just like anything else, when you work with people and you do things with people and you have a team and you're working together for the same goal, I think that that's how prejudices are destroyed the most, when we're working together, because you realize when you're working with somebody and you guys are working well together, you have a functioning team, you're like, well, okay, we might have more, our genetics are a little different. I mean, think about it. We're talking genetics, and it's just that overtly people's are different color, and we as human beings, I mean, to me, being a racist is kind of stupid. I mean, it's just, why would you possibly judge someone, to me, on the color of their skin? I mean, and I think when you are on a team, all of that falls away much faster, because it's all about your ability and how do you guys work together, and so I think quickly when you're in, and I think that's true when you work with people and when you do things with people and you get to know them as people, you interact with them in the same way. Like when you're playing baseball, you all want to win. So you've got something, you have a collective goal that you all are hoping to meet together. And in order to meet that goal, you have to work together. So I think that's a great way. And the LA Brooklyn Dodgers, good for them. Although some people are still mad that the Brooklyn Dodgers are not still the Brooklyn Dodgers. And I understand that. But I agree. But I think, I think sports is, I think it's great. I wasn't aware of that, though. Jason S. sends in a tip and says, did you see the video during the violent riots, oops, a.k.a. peaceful protests, where 10 black guys stoned and beat an innocent white man to death in the middle of the street while they yelled the N-word at him? I hope the military would end that violence. Look, all of that violence is terrible. There's all of it's, but, I'm not going to pillory an entire group of people that have 400 years of oppression behind them who are, I mean, I was angry over the same thing. How many times do you have to watch people gunned down the streets? This violence must end. You know, it's not going to end. I've said on the show a million times, you cannot trade one oppression for another. You cannot. We have to solve these problems and we have to move forward together. Otherwise, it's never going to end. Can you imagine if there wasn't this kind of racial inequality and that we had a more just and verdant society, what we could be doing right now, where we could be going, what we could be accomplishing with all of the tools and all of the technology and all of the things that we have at our fingertips and the way we can express and the connections we can make all around the planet. To me, look, all of this stuff has to shake out. We have to have this kind of this conversation hasn't gone. We haven't moved this needle in 400 years. 400 years, and you know, I know in my lifetime before I was born, you know, Martin Luther King, and you had the civil rights movement, Malcolm X, everything that was going on in the 60s. Where have we have, and then I got to live through the LA riots in 1992. We haven't moved anywhere. In this particular issue, we are abject failures. This country is failing. We would get an F. We've had the same problem for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and we are somehow unable to solve it. Well, let's solve it. You know, and I'm not advocating for violence. And it's horrible. There's horrible violence on all sides. But, you know, an eye for an eye doesn't work. You know, it doesn't work. Remember what James Bond said to Melina Havelock in For Your Eyes Only, who she was seeking revenge for the death of her parents? He tells her the old adage, you know, before seeking revenge, you must first dig 2 graves. One for your victim and, of course, one for yourself, because you're going to lose yourself in the process. We have to end all violence. We have to end it all. We have to end systemic, institutionalized racism in this country. We have to make this society more equal. We have to listen to one another. You know, we have to. And I mean, we could stay here, and in another however many years, it's going to happen again until we have sweeping reform. And like I said, even Andrew Cuomo said at his time as a prosecutor, he said our criminal justice system itself, it's not just the police, it's our entire legal system. Our entire legal system is by definition racist. It is racist against certain members of our population. Our drug laws have been racist. I mean, there's all kinds of things that need to be reformed. They need to be reformed. And we also have to pull people up from poverty as well, because that's a big part of it. It's not so much, it's race. It is a lot of race, but it's also poverty. It's also, you know, as I said, why don't we make healthcare and why don't we make education national security priorities? The beginning of America should start with a healthy and well-educated population, and a healthy and stable population where people are not living in poverty, and they're taken care of, so they can concentrate, and we can help them concentrate, and we can help each other concentrate on the matters at hand. How can we build this into the best society on earth? Because we're not doing that. We are failing. And we're not, you know, rather than blaming people for the problem, for what's happening, let's go back to the root causes, the root problems. Again, I keep thinking, I mean, these are not problems that people are like, I don't know why this is happening. I know why it's happening, because there's systemic racism and poverty and not a lot of education, and we can fix these problems. And the idea that we don't have a great educational system, that we should have the best in the world, and that we don't have the greatest healthcare system in the world, until we do those things, you know, and for everybody, why is the water in Flint, Michigan still polluted? Why? I mean, we got to solve these problems. We got to solve them. And the problem is there's not a whole lot of overt profit in it. But then I would ask you to go back to the Godfather films. And in the Godfather films, all the secrets of life are in the Godfather films, all 3 of them. And in the 3rd movie, when Michael Corleone is making his bid to be head of International Immobiliare, what does he say? He says he believes that helping his fellow man is profitable. Maybe not on a spreadsheet, but in the long run, you are going to make a more secure society. I mean, period. Chef DeMac sends in a super chat and says, I saw Santa Sangre and El Topo as a double feature while trying mushrooms for the first time. Oh, man. Oh, wow. As they said in the 80s, tripendicular. That was an experience, says Chef DeMac. Man, I will bet it was. Ray Holdridge says, what are your thoughts on Death to Smoochie? It's pretty dark. But you know what? I only saw it once. And I would need to see it again, but I remember liking it, and it is pretty funny, and it is underrated. You know what? Now that when did Death to Smoochie come out? Let's see. I think that Scott Mance would be mad at me right now. 2002. 2002. You know, it's interesting about Death to Smoochie. I thought, you know, Danny DeVito directed Death to Smoochie, and he had a really interesting career as a director. Like, he directed Hoffa, you know, directed that. And I wish he would direct more movies. I think he directed War of the Roses too. Yeah, I'd like to see more from him. Alexander Wilson is here and says, graduated from Catholic high school. One movie that is on the banned list is 1947's Black Narcissus. It's on HBO Max. It would be a great watch with Elizabeth. She loves old school eroticas. Man, y'all get hammered on some of the show. You know, I got to tell you, Black Narcissus is an incredible film, and I own the Blu-ray, and it's beautiful. It is a beautiful movie. It's another Nuds in Trouble movie, and you know, that's actually a really good idea, Alexander. That Black Narcissus is a good idea. Man, y'all get hammered on some of the show. You know what? We were pretty hammered on Brick's show, but no one was more hammered than Elizabeth on that one. So give it up for her. Anonymous sends in another tip, and thank you. Anonymous sent an anonymous tip in, but didn't say anything. So he's truly anonymous, or she is truly anonymous. Alexander Wilson does another tip in and says, I thought Black Panther was one of the greatest movies I've seen. There were so many subtle elements that resonated with me, like how Cap's shield, the symbol of America, was made from stolen resources from Africa, like how slaves built the good old USA. Oh, I agree with you. I mean, I think that, and you know, what's really interesting is I understand the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but that's pretty damn ballsy. And that wasn't overt. You know, you don't have to like go look, you don't have to be a film student to dig into that movie. It was there. They didn't shy away from that material. I mean, obviously you're still doing a comic book movie based on 1966 Black Panther character. And there's a lot of mysticism and all that. And it's great. It's great. But for them to address those issues, it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I'm glad you liked it. I mean, you know, I just thought that I thought that the ending of Black Panther, I wanted more out of it. I loved watching the film, and I think the last quarter of it seemed a little too mundane. I wanted it to go into more, I don't know, more just the resolution of the conflict, the fact that they ended up in this big fight. I mean, I guess they had to, you know, Killmonger and T'Challa winding up in this huge fight they had to do that, but it would have been, I think it would have been nice to have seen them drill down into some more issues that were in the movie more. But yeah. Stubble McShave says, what country or culture that James Bond never has been featured in would you like to see him in? Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I'm trying to think, where hasn't he been? That's a good question. I don't have an answer. That's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I'll tell you what I don't like, though. I don't like it when James Bond's in America. I don't. And it's not because I dislike America. It's just, I live in America. And to me, James Bond, I know Europeans are probably like, I love it when James Bond, like when he was meeting Jimmy Dean in Vegas. Why, I like that. And no, San Francisco, James Bond on fire trucks? Yes. No, as long as James Bond stays out of America, I don't care where he goes. I love the exotic. That's part of the thing that I loved as a kid was the exotic locales. Everywhere James Bond went, you know, it was someplace I'd never seen before. Yeah, I mean, I would like to see James Bond maybe go to Dubai. Like I know Mission Impossible and stuff, someplace like that. You know, I think Bond hasn't really been in I mean, he's been to Egypt, and I guess was he in Africa at the beginning of Casino Royale? I guess he was, but someplace like you know, I would love to see him go to uh oh God, Lagos. You know, there's a city. I want to see James Bond go to an urban environment in Africa because there are some, and I think that would be interesting. You know, that's a place that it would be interesting to see them go to. But he's been to Egypt, someplace else. I think it'd be interesting. Julius Goodwin is here once again. Thank you, sir, so much for the generous contribution to the channel. Belief is a beautiful armor. It makes for the heaviest sword. Like punching underwater, you never can hit what you're trying for. Some need the exhibition. Some have to know they tried. It's the chemical weapon for the war that's waging on the inside. That's very interesting. This is John Mayer's song "Belief," by the way. Oh, I didn't know that. I do believe in that sentiment, though. You know, having belief. Look, you know, a lot of having a cause becomes something that if you don't have other things that you're necessarily doing, having a cause can be sometimes the greatest motivating factor in anyone's life. You know, and it can consume you, and it can drive you, and it can cause great change in the world. And having that belief can be a great thing, but I understand it can also be a heavy burden. I like that idea. I think that's great. Eyes on the Wire says, do you think Lawrence of Arabia will be released on its own? I see that it is currently as part of the Columbia Classics box for pre-order. It comes out Tuesday. Funny enough, Lawrence of Arabia is number 2 after Vertigo that I'm chomping at the bit to purchase. You know, I think probably it will be. But, you know, I hate to say it, as much as I love physical media, the studios are looking to get rid of physical media. And it's kind of a bummer. It's kind of a bummer. Dan V says, sorry for the confusion, Rob. Jay claimed Campio is a racist due to him not considering Black Panther Best Picture worthy, while not acknowledging his thoughts on the Spider-Verse. Yes. Kiwi is a nickname for people from New Zealand. Taika uses it, but Tamora Morrison's Maori. Yeah, that's why he was in Once Were Warriors. No, I've lived in, for those of you who don't know, I lived in New Zealand on and off for from 2001 through 2004 when I was working on Lord of the Rings. I worked on Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers, and then I moved over and was working on Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as a documentarian. So I love New Zealand. It's one of my favorite places on earth, and the Maori culture is very, very interesting to me. And Once Were Warriors and Utu are 2 very good movies about the culture. So yeah, I'm a fan. Yeah, I you know, I think look, my opinion, do I think that Black Panther was a Best Picture movie? Alexander Wilson, he would probably beg to differ. I didn't think so, only because I would say that if I was just looking at it as a movie, it was kind of hampered by the fact that it was a more of an origin story. And what I want from Black Panther is I want Black Panther's equivalent of Winter Soldier. The same way, like I thought the same thing about Captain America, the First Avenger. I thought, okay, you know, I liked the first half of it, but then it became a little formulaic for me. But then Winter Soldier, I think, knocked it out of the park. But Black Panther, you had to establish the world. You know, when you're setting up an origin story, you have to delve into that world because it hasn't been set up yet, and we'd only seen Black Panther in Civil War. So we needed to establish his milieu. We needed to establish Wakanda, so it had more of that traditional structure. And I'm looking forward. I think Black Panther 2 will knock it out of the park, especially with Ryan Coogler coming back. I think it's going to be amazing, and I can't wait. But I don't think that's having an opinion about a movie, not thinking that movie is a best picture. I don't know how that makes somebody a racist. I don't, people throwing that term around. I mean, it's hugely damaging. Because I was branded a racist on social media, let me be clear, my entire legacy right now, as part of the Inglorious Trexperts, something I've been doing for years, is gone. Is gone. My favorite thing in the world that I was a part of is gone because I was branded a racist. Now, there are some people that would say, well, good for you. But one, I'm not a racist. There's ample evidence to support that again and again and again. And two, because of, retweets being retweeted without the initial videos or things that I was, think about that. Now, did I deserve that? Do I deserve to have my livelihood curtailed? I mean, I've got a family here. I've got my professional credentials and credibility, and it was gone. Some of it was taken away. Some of my favorite things to do, which is talk about Star Trek on a show that we've had so many great guests, and it's probably the best Star Trek podcast that ever has been. It's gone for me. So, yeah. Herb Thornton says, hey, Rob, no worries. I am a black man in the South. I knew your intent with your tweets. You are not a racist. And those complaining are not black. The right-wingers are trying to sway you to see we're your friends. Those liberals are the real racists. Don't you believe it? All the best, brother. Well, Herb, I want to thank you very much for that. By the way, where in the South are you? I don't know. I got to spend a summer in South Carolina, man. I love the South. I love the South. It's great. And I appreciate that. But, it's like we can't, you throw these labels at people and it gets, now everybody's just willing to believe it. And then it follows you around. Like I'm sure that I will lose work in the future because if you do a cursory Google search, and everybody does, it's going to show up that I'm a racist. No one's going to look into that allegation. They're just going to see, oh, well, we can't hire him. So, yeah, but I just think it's tough. We got to be careful rather than, I think rather than branding everybody with a scarlet letter or something, we've got to keep the dialogue going. This letter comes from Kenneth St. Bernard. Dear Robert, I am a criminal defense attorney and a liturgical musician in New York. Wow, that's cool. And I spend much of my time with folks who have made very bad decisions. There are people like this in jails and in churches. None of us is perfect. The good folks just keep trying to get better. I've been a subscriber for a little while, and it's clear to me that the community you have built is inclusive and that you are at heart a decent guy. Unfortunately, you had a bad hair day and wrote things in a peak of anger that aren't representative of who you are. While that doesn't excuse your lapse in judgment, please remember that your word is the most perfect representation of the world of who you are, and often what comes out of our mouths comes from the deep recesses of our hearts. Thank goodness most of us don't have those moments in public forums, and in the future, I hope that you won't either. It is fortunate that most of us aren't judged by the dumbest things we've ever done, but public figures often are. I would like to encourage you to not take to heart the anger directed towards you by folks you may have worked with. In my experience, we are often the most disappointed by those from whom we expect the most, and vice versa. You'll be fine. Just take this setback as an opportunity to grow. Growth is sometimes painful. Keep on making the great content that drew folks like me to your channel in the first place. You have much to offer. You will be angry again. We all go through these things. Next time, just don't press send. All the best to you, Elizabeth, and your loved ones. Kenneth St. Bernard. You know what, Kenneth? I couldn't have spoken that better. And this is why I love this community. I mean, I think that, unfortunately, I agree with you. I think that a lot of people, especially the people I was working with, really didn't know me at all. And certainly they weren't watching this channel, and they didn't know much about what I've done or any of those things. So, yes, quick to judge. And I don't bear anybody any ill will. It's not like they were trying. I don't believe they had malicious intent. I think when it started to snowball, there was a bit of malicious intent that started to happen because people jump on the bandwagon without necessarily knowing everything or knowing the full story. And there was a lot of people that just don't know who I am, and even people I work with. So, yeah, this one comes from Doc Vader, D-O-K. Hi, Rob. Greetings to one and all. I am sending a letter from the hotbed of 70s exploitation, women in prison, and 1980s Vietnam movies. And if you chose the Philippines, then you guessed right. A few weeks back, my brother sent a letter, and you read it. It was Recite. His name is pronounced, though, as Recite, if you wonder how. Anyhow, since I've been working at home and with the lockdown, and all I found was the time to watch, and in early March, I watched the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation. I found it very entertaining, and I show much appreciation to it. I didn't follow up on watching the next seasons as I concentrated on movies. I had 800 or so on my Letterboxd IMDb watch list, and I tracked down where I can watch each. Half the time, it was only available for streaming in the U.S., in which a VPN comes in useful. Do you have a watch list or watched list that is available online that we can check? Oh my God, people have asked me that before. If I put a watch list of every movie I've ever seen. I would like to cross-check and compare all the movies you have seen, and I guess it's already around 10,000 probably. Taking advantage of the current situation since March, I've watched more or less 230 movies to date. A bulk of those are movies that were shot here in the Philippines. So a lot of Kamen movies, especially the ones directed by Cirio Santiago. I caught up and I've watched 70% of his directed, produced, or written films. Do you have, you know what? Oh my God. I would have to, I don't know all of his movies. I would have to go look. Hang on. Let me take a gander. Let me take a gander. Let me take a gander. He was a prolific Filipino film producer, director, writer, and cinematographer. Wow. That's crazy. Well, there you go. And I will look. Let me go back. You want me to go back to the... Oh, he directed the 1988 Expendables. Yeah. Cage Fury. Oh, I think just off the top of my head, if I had to pick one, I remember seeing The Sisterhood. He directed The Sisterhood. I would probably say that. Wow, he did direct a lot. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that you've caught up and you watched 70% of his directed, produced, and written films. My movie grind continues, and how significant of the times that I saw In the Heat of the Night. Oh, you saw In the Heat of the Night's a great movie. That's a movie that is certainly about today. We do not know the severity of what is happening there stateside. We can only watch through the eyes of Twitter or the news. We also happen to experience our own struggles here at home, and so significant that we heard, as well as notwithstanding and not forgetting, fighting for our fellow oppressed world citizens. Stay safe always. Maraming Salamat. Many thanks, Dork Vader. Well, thank you for that. Now I'm going to have to go back and watch all those movies. I want to go see The Sisterhood again. I haven't seen that. I don't remember the last time I saw that movie. Omar94 is here. Hi, Rob. Congratulations on episode 435. I have more recommendations to give you, your moderators, and the viewers for movies I like and think are underappreciated. My first recommendation is a 1992 movie starring Mel Gibson, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Elijah Wood called Forever Young. I love Forever Young. A little trivia. J.J. Abrams wrote the script, which sold for $2 million and was originally called The Rest of Daniel. I remember that. My second recommendation is a 1966 movie called How to Steal a Million, starring Audrey Hepburn and Peter O'Toole, which is great. It was directed by William Wyler, who also made Roman Holiday, Ben-Hur, and The Best Years of Our Lives. You're watching some, I gotta say, Omar, you're crushing it with these recommendations. My third recommendation is a movie I mixed on. I'm not sure if it's underappreciated, but I don't hear a lot of people talk about it much. So my third recommendation is a 1953 Howard Hawks movie called Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Come on, man. You're mixed on it. Okay, starring Marilyn Monroe as Jane Russell. This is the movie where Monroe sings Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. These are my recommendations: Forever Young, How to Steal a Million, and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. I'd say that's a very, very strong list. So good on you, sir. This one comes from Jack Crane. Jack Crane says, "Hi, Rob. I wanted to write to you about something I've noticed amongst some of the videos supporting you, which I also do. And that is the notion of never apologize for being yourself or don't say sorry to a certain group of people, i.e. internet lefties. While I can understand the intention behind such notions, they miss an important point. Saying sorry when you know you have made a mistake isn't weakness. It takes a measure of self-reflection that is in itself a measure of strength. Refusing to back down simply to spare yourself the perceived indignity of admitting a mistake is a weakness that is far more corrosive than I think a lot of people may immediately think. With all of the unrest in the world, I believe people should be able to take a look at themselves and their actions and listen to others and be willing to at least entertain the thought that despite the best intentions, they may be wrong." Jack, great letter. I totally agree with you. Look, I didn't just fuck up once. I fucked up twice. The initial tweet, I should have worded it better. I should not have used such incendiary language. I also shouldn't have said fuck you to somebody I know. You know, RB3, a guy that I've worked with, who's literally shot when I've acted. He's a cameraman. You know, he shoots and edits for Collider, or for the Schmodown. I mean, you know, we're friends. If he wants to come at me, I shouldn't have been like, fuck you, dude. I mean, well, I thought we were friends, but he was. Look, I was given an opportunity. People did tell me like, hey, Rob, you might want to rethink. I was obstinate. I made a mistake, and I don't think I think you're absolutely right. I made two mistakes. The tweet was, and also it was also a tweet that wasn't up to my normal standards of the Duke of Dope discourse. It was bad. It was a tweet that was obviously misconstrued. People took it. Because of that tweet, I'm no longer the Inglorious Trexperts episodes that I've done are gone. I mean, you know, I take that. I have no problem if I fucked up or my work is not up to par. I have no problem accepting that responsibility and apologizing for it. Yeah, and I don't think that's a weakness at all. I think that's what you have to do in life. You know, you have to apologize when you've made mistakes. And the important thing is to know that you've actually, it's not even that you apologize, it's that knowing you fucked up in the first place. So then you can do that self-reflection and then apologize. I mean, to understand, to know. And for me, look, I'll tell you something. One of the things that I've learned, especially when you're editing a movie, is it can always be better. You always have to ask yourself, okay, how can I make this better? And you always, with Twitter, you know, it's hard to go back. And once you've put it out there, especially now, people are screen capping things. And then it's also that gotcha culture, too. I mean, once you've said something, people love to gotcha. And that's part of it, too. But when you know, and I know, I've been on social media for a long time, I know. So anyway, I agree. I agree with you. Sean M. writes, Rob, I wanted to respond to a comment Mark Chure made during your show yesterday about open carry of firearms. Mark, I'm interested in guns. They are fascinating from a mechanical point of view. However, I loathe open carry and the laws that allow it and the mentality behind it. Real life is not the Old West. I'm not saying you're a bad guy, but if I see someone carrying a gun in a shopping mall or my office, I would want them to leave. It's not right to carry a gun in a civil situation. That's my 2 cents. On your property, you can have any guns you want. Fine. At the range, any guns you want. On the street, in the office, I got to say, fuck your guns, man. Leave them at home. You have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, but this doesn't translate into showing your guns in a manner that overrides the First Amendment. I will share a story that is pertinent to me. When I was a kid, about 12 years old, I was playing cricket in the shadow of Donington Castle in Newbury, Berkshire, England. I was at bat and I missed a throw which hit the wicket, and I got really fucking annoyed. I threw my bat in the air. The bat hit a pram with a newborn baby inside. The baby was not hurt. What would have happened if I had fired my gun off in a random expression of rage? It's not okay to have guns in open carry. Again, Sean, that's a thoughtful letter, and I totally understand your position. Look, I think the problem is in our society, if you're carrying a gun or you're open carrying, it that's a statement in itself that might have ramifications that aren't necessarily good. But again, open carry, I it happens. But yeah, I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from. Pablo Contreras, greetings from Mexico City, RMB. I was heartbroken to see a bunch of your colleagues, after a business decision which I also did not agree with or respect was taken, slander your good name continuously on social media. The way these people were so quick to judge you based on a single tweet, yet in 3 years of working with you, never took the time to actually get to know you and hear your story, speaks volumes of the losers that they are, to put it mildly. Now, hang on a second. First of all, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate the support. But to be fair, when we're doing the Schmodown, you know, you walk in, you do your thing, and you leave. It's not like we're all in an office for 8 hours a day. And I don't socialize with any of those people outside of the Schmodown. So the only time we ever really saw each other was for work. And you're always talking, when you're at work, everybody's talking about the Schmodown. So there was never an opportunity to get these people to know me. I remember I was talking to Roxy Stryer once, who I love. And she had said, I said this before, she was surprised that I'd worked on films. You know, she didn't know that. And it's interesting that we're at a, I'll tell you an interesting story. In the entire time I've been on the Schmodown, when I've walked in there, certainly in the last couple of years, no one has ever asked me about any of the movies I've worked on, either as a DVD or Blu-ray documentarian or as a filmmaker myself. Never. You know, no one's ever said, what was it like living in New Zealand working on the Lord of the Rings movies? Nobody, I don't know if anybody even knows that about me. But I wouldn't necessarily, now I'm not excusing, like, I agree with you. I was a colleague. I never said an unkind word to any of those people. You know, and the little Twitter back and forth I had with Clark Wolf back in 2016, I didn't know Clark and she didn't know me, and I thought I was just being fun, Schmodown funny. I didn't realize anything about her, and I but it wasn't. But for her to come out and then say I harassed her, well, no, I did not. I reject that notion, and the tweets are for all to see. I mean, and they're still there. You can go look at them. If you want to see the tweets, go look up Easy Cheetah, like Clark Wolf, Easy Cheetah, Burnett RM. I mean, it's not like so, unless they've been taken down. I have them, but it was no big deal. And but then again, that's a problem. I didn't see. There was a misunderstanding there too. I didn't realize. Like, I thought my humor. I thought it was funny when someone said that Team Heroes did Clark dirty, and then I wrote back in my first tweet, I said, well, that's, you know, usually women complain I don't do them dirty enough, # Team Heroes. I mean, my character in the Schmodown would say something exactly like that, and I thought that was kind of funny, and it wasn't to her directly, but I didn't know. Let me go on and say, the second RB3 and others started to call you alt-right, or whatever insults they could throw at you to make themselves feel virtuous, I jumped on Twitter and fiercely defended the man that I apparently knew better than any of them, despite having never met you personally. I respectfully presented rational arguments which were never heard, and instead I was labeled a racist. I even got blocked by a few of those people, including Clark and Jay. The way some fans even dared to utter Schnepp's good name as a way to attack you, I didn't know that, made my blood boil, to say the least. I say all of this to show that after this incident, I could see these people for what they are, and I saw how toxic a lot of them were, which hurt as a fan of them. However, this provided a moment of clarity for me, as I'm sure it did for you, in a different way. I saw which community I wanted to be a part of and what creators I wanted to associate myself with. I am now incredibly proud to call myself a part of such a diverse and open community as the Post-Geek Singularity. The diversity you have here is something these people would kill to have, not only because of ethnicity, color, race, but because of the intellectual diversity you have, which I don't think they would even understand. What you have built here just amazes me. This actually feels like a community. You take the time to know as many of the people here as you can, meaning you actually put in the work that very little people in this space do. I, for one, am glad to go from a casual fan of your work to a diehard member of the Post-Geek Singularity thanks to this incident. Stay strong, my friend. The hate will pass, and after, you will see who your friends really are. John Campia, Jeremy Johns, and much more. You will also find unexpected allies. Jeremy from G&G, Nerdrotic, Andy Signor. I'm sorry this letter was too long. This is my first time writing to your show, but I had to get that off my chest. Keep being yourself, man, and keep up the good work. Listen, I would also like to say something, too, about RB3, and Jay as well. RB3 is like 22 years old, you know, and I'm much older than him. I mean, I'll tell you this. I was in my 30s when he was born. And the reason that I've worked with RB3 and he does good work, and I actually really like him as a person. I think he's a good guy. It is, you also have to take into consideration, as somebody who is older and a little bit more experienced, I think we're not equal in the sense that I need to do better. I need to set an example. You know, RB3 is young people are figuring out who they are. And for RB3 and Jay Washington, who are black men at a time when we are watching black men, I mean, black men have always been executed, so have black women. But now we're seeing it on social media. And when Jay Washington and RB3 said on I Didn't See the Sen show that they're tired of seeing black men murdered on camera, I'm right there with them, and they are not wrong. And so I don't want to be branded a racist. I don't think I'm a racist. I can understand why people wanted to pile on, but I do not blame them. Do I hate the fact that I have been removed from Inglorious Trexperts? Do I hate the fact that they took down all my episodes? Yes, I do. But I think ultimately it will be borne out through my work and this channel how silly that is, that somebody calls me a racist. But it is smeared all over the internet. The other people that came after me, that's why I don't blame RB3 or Jay Washington. I like both of those guys. Like I said, nobody gives hugs like Jay Washington does. That he's a warm, open, caring guy. And, you know, if we weren't in this situation, this never would have happened. They would never have branded me a racist or anything like that. And we would have continued on for years doing what we do. And so this is an unfortunate situation that was exacerbated by where we are at right now. And, you know, one of the things that I think people forget is that I perceive myself to just be me. But in this space, more and more, I mean, I'm older. I'm one of the oldest people in this space. And I'm working right next to people that are substantially younger than I am. Now, I never considered that from their perspective, maybe I'm the creepy, weird old dude. They're like, why is this guy doing this? Why is an older person that's supposed to be, you know, perhaps more mature? Yeah. And I'm just trying to offer a point of view that I can understand where I think if you're younger, you could look at me going, I mean, look at this. You know, I'm an arrested adolescent. And there's a lot of people that would be like, why is this guy this way? So I'm sure that I think that that's wrong. You know, I think their perception of me would be wrong, but I'm sure it was there too. I don't think Jay Washington and RB3, but maybe in the girls' point of view, like, I don't know. I have never said an unkind word about Emma Fife, and it was very interesting. But again, they were rallying to their friend's side. I mean, they were rallying. Anybody who's ever worked with RB3 loves the guy. You can't not love him when you work with him, you know. And he was actually reaching out to me, and I was, yeah. So it was an incident that all the way around. But I think you're right. I think the idea that I did not get the benefit of the doubt from colleagues that should know me better. They don't know me at all, clearly. And that's unfortunate. And I think that's perhaps I could say that maybe I didn't. Could I have done something to make them know me more? I don't know. I don't know. But yes. Anyway, this one comes from William La Rochelle. Hi, Rob. Just another one of the many people weighing in to be supportive about the Twitter thing. If you like someone, you give them latitude. Nuance was a word you'd used before that most notorious tweet when someone piled on about a post showing a skinny white guy crumpled and kicked for defending a shop. You had to tell someone life is more nuanced than left and right. That applies to the captain getting killed and remarks about it. It's great that Jeremy of Geeks and Gamers and also the Echo Base folks have spoken for you, and that might give some impression that the right wing has infiltrated the Post-Geek Singularity. But the prism everyone looks through in these heightened times, whatever good may emerge from it, has led some of us to find ourselves unfriended or demonized over a single post or a projection as people extract verbal DNA from a word or thought and believe they can create or clone the entire character of a person. Like the streets of certain neighborhoods, even discussion boards can be overly policed so that someone's bubble shields them from contrary opinions. That same sensitivity might be behind the Harloff thing. My interpretation of the tweet on the captain's assailant was frankly that Second Amendment people who claim they must have guns to save people from shootings by crazies and that school teachers should be armed for that reason. In a reality, where are they lines up with people not really wanting to slip into Travis Bickle mode on demand. It could be argued that shooting to kill someone who has just killed an innocent will prevent that person from harming countless others. That's kind of where I was coming from. But it is easy to get into the weeds of these things. I just finished rewatching A History of Violence, and Cronenberg wanted the audience to be complicit in Vigo's actions against the intruders at the cafe. But I admit, when I see a scene like that, I condone it, and I see his violence as an extension of the threat presented that had to be stopped. Even in real life, I might freeze. Even if in real life, I might freeze. There might also be a point where one apology is enough. Even Mel Gibson, after a few years, finally said, "I've made all my mea culpas," and the matter must then rest. The internet has a twitchy attention span. I recall a Collider video set in a similar conference room where someone said of viewer comments, "Some people feel it is a town hall and they should all have their turn at the mic." That person implied that those in the room and on camera must be the true experts. It caused me to reconsider just why I was spending any time at all listening to that expert. That was the last Collider video I sat through, except for the Harloff Butthurt video that went viral and a couple of deepfake ones, because sometimes even free content isn't worth one's time. I think you have a reasoned approach to discussing film and the world in general, and as long as you're not talking about The Last Crusade, your points make sense. I hope this all falls away, and moving forward, it will just be an embarrassment for those who shunned as a knee-jerk reaction. It is already fading away, just as my interest in certain pundits dissolves. They say that a first draft of anything is crap, so I often debate about this kind of letter, and I try and avoid posts on Twitter, and I half cringe even when debating movies on discussion boards. All of that must be crap. So it is brave to put anything into the crazy spiral that is the Twitter filter, where people conduct the ongoing purity test, as Bill Maher calls it. Anything to break people into tribes and cut someone else from a team, or voice the entitled immediate gratification they have honed on twitchy social media that requires no history and no context, let alone nuance. Onward. That's from William La Rochelle in Toronto. What a great letter, man. I very much appreciate that letter. Thank you for writing it in. But yeah, you said it. That was fantastic. I love that. Now let's see. I have another letter here. I'm going a long way. I'm almost done here. Hang on. Well, hang on. Let me see if I can find this. This one's from Jeffrey Mao. I just have to go find it. Here it is. This is a letter from Mr. Jeffrey Mao. And a quick letter today. I've been watching the YouTube channel Films at Home. And Jeff, the guy who runs it, but not me, though I wish I had his equipment and collection, I watch films at home a lot, has been doing a great job reviewing the latest physical media releases, covering news, and doing some features. There was one in particular that was interesting, and it was explaining why it is that older films look better on 4K than do current films. The explanation is nothing earth-shattering. It should be evident to anyone who's familiar with motion pictures, but it still deserves repeating. Films that were filmed on film, or photographed photochemically, is there an easier way to say this, and were released theatrically by big studios, almost exclusively utilized a 35mm or 70mm frame all the way from the camera to the projector up until the early 2000s, when films started to be shot on digital and theaters began projecting in digital. There have been many debates about the merits of digital versus film from both an aesthetic and financial perspective. Clearly, there are budgetary advantages to shooting on digital. The biggest advantages is for the budding, low-budget filmmaker, as the barrier to entry in the past with shooting on film was exorbitantly high in terms of cost, development, processing, and time. But we're not talking about that here. We're only talking about the aesthetic qualities of film versus digital. And while you can talk about subjective differences and preferences from an objectively factual point of view, film, be it 35 or for sure 70mm, exceeds 4K in terms of capturing more actual visual data. Unfortunately, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, and you'll find different numbers if you search online, but everyone will tell you that 35mm film will get you more detail than digital will. So when it comes to transferring that 35mm film image to 4K for your home video release, you're actually starting with a source that has more data than what you end up with. In fact, Jeff mentions that 35mm films might benefit even more from 8K, but there's no support for 8K to get enough of a market share to justify any studio or video company doing an 8K transfer. So just know that it could be possible for an older film to look even better in 8K, but 4K is probably as good as we're ever going to get. It should be noted that when you're going into 8K, we can't even see that all the information that would be available to that. So I don't see that ever happening. So why does that make digitally shot 4K films look not as good in comparison, you say? Surely the Red or the Airy Raw can shoot in 6K or 8K and it should look great, right? I mean, cinematographer Steve Yedlin has shown that he can make a digital film look as good as film and indistinguishable. Very true, but the big difference is with visual effects. You're absolutely right. Since almost all visual effects are now computer generated, the images are rendered at 2K. This is done for time and budgetary reasons. It takes long enough now to render at 2K even using the supercomputers that CGI houses use. To render at 4K would take at least 4 times as long because a 4K image is 4 times larger than a 2K image. So even if your VFX shots has a photographic element in it, or plate as you like to call it, the plate is then down converted from 4K to whatever resolution it was shot with to 2K. Then when the whole thing is done and up converted to a 4K digital intermediate, that's not even guaranteed. Some films are finished in 2K still today. Tango Shalom was actually finished in 4K. So when the studio is then going to make a 4K out of it, that 2K DI, digital intermediate, is just up converted to 4K. It's true. And even if, say, Endgame is finished as a 4K DI, it was still up converted because the CGI had to be done at 2K. So the only way to get a true shot on digital 4K film is really that it can't have CGI or minimal CGI so that it would never be down converted at any point during the processing. But even Knives Out, shot by Yedlin for Rian Johnson, was shot at 3.4K and finished at 2K. So even the 4K disc isn't giving you true 4K. It's absolutely true. So I think the takeaway here is that 4K really benefits the photochemically shot films by far the most. The quality, the detail, the color grading that HDR provides really makes those 35mm shine, literally. If anyone's on the fence about going 4K, it's worth it just to get the old films like Apocalypse Now, The Shining, Blade Runner, Predator, Die Hard, Top Gun, all your favorites. It's actually been really fun reliving my youth, getting all nostalgic. In fact, I hope and feel that 4Ks will cause a resurgence in interest in older films and will actually serve as a bit of a boon to them. Some smaller, less appreciated films may come to find a new audience with 4Ks. The smaller boutique houses are doing a great job, but they don't have the budgets and access and archives that the big studios do. If there's been any positive from the recent coronavirus-induced lockdowns, it might be that people are taking a fresh look at the benefits of physical media formats for home entertainment and not completely relying on streaming services. I have bought a few giallo and exploitation films on disc that I had watched on streaming services like Prime, and I can tell there's a big difference. As a result, I'm recommitted to pursuing physical media to add to my collection. I will be especially keen to add 4K releases of older films that I might not have considered before simply because of the enhanced image and sound qualities of the format. I recently just got the Blues Brothers. It's amazing, by the way. I pre-ordered Flash Gordon on 4K from Arrow, even though I've never seen it before. Oh, you're in for a treat. Remember, it's goofy. It's a camp fest, and it's wacky, but it by design. I'd highly encourage anyone else to do the same and prioritize your 4K buying toward those older films and away from new releases. Every bit helps those boutique houses and encourages the studios to keep releasing their back catalog films as well. Thanks, and keep on watching those 4Ks. Jeff. Well, Jeff, that's a great letter and a great explanation of all of these things. You are absolutely 100% correct about all of that. And you know what that means? That means it's time right now to promote my own movie. That's right. The Hills Run Red, ladies and gentlemen, comes out on Blu-ray with 6.5 hours of new special features, commentaries, never-before-seen featurettes, an original making-of that I made originally, and reversible cover art. And that comes out on June 16th. You can get it at shoutfactory.com or order it at Amazon. And they sent me, I actually have a copy. And I'm going to give a few away. I'm going to give a few of The Hills Run Red, a movie I produced. Let's see if you can see it. Here it is from Scream Factory. I'm going to give a few away. I also have one for our man Dieter in Germany. I don't know how yet. I'll figure that out. But tomorrow I'm going to give 2 copies of The Hills Run Red, the brand new, it's not even out on the streets, The Hills Run Red Blu-ray. I will give them away. Now, I warn you, if you're not a fan of slasher movies and ultra-violent movies and things like that, maybe it's not your cup of tea. If you're more of an Annie of Green Gables person, you might not want The Hills Run Red. However, there are a lot of interesting special features, and you will learn a lot about movie making. So that's pretty cool. And how many YouTubers can give you their movie that they've produced? And not only did I produce the film, not only did my production company produce the film, but I also produced all the special features on this disc. How many people could say that, huh? Let's see. There's a lot of people that have been sending in things. Wow, I keep seeing stuff coming in. Alexander Wilson says, watching the NBA on NBC, the promo of Game 7 between the Lakers and the Kings, with Shaq being Superman, with the lines of had Superman finally met his match. Can he overcome his weakness? Then Three Doors Down's Kryptonite started to started to play to the Kings highlight. That's awesome. JPR PH1 sends in a super chat and says, "Hail Rob! I just saw a wonderful interview with Mark Zakri of Space Command this week on the Nerdrotic Live channel. It's a must-see. Especially for those sci-fi writers of Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard and the new Doctor Who. Respect to you." Well, thank you. Yeah, I like Mark Zakri. He's a good man, and he's one of my favorite books ever in the world is The Twilight Zone Companion. So I think that's great. Mosin Zayman says, "Hey, John." I think you meant to say, "Hey, Mark." "Hey, Rob." No. "Hey, Rob. Do you think Matt Reeves' Batman will be good? Do you think if Batfleck continues on HBO Max, DC will benefit?" Look, you know what? I just like to see I want to see a Ben Affleck Batman movie. I think Matt Reeves' Batman's going to be good. Look, I love Robert Pattinson in the new trailer for Tenet. I love that end bit. He looks like he's great in that movie, and I can't wait to see him as Batman after watching that. Anthony Gonzalez sends in a tip, and he says, "Hey, Robert, you've mentioned just about every sci-fi film you can think of in your 400-plus episodes, but never Cocoon. I love Cocoon. I have Cocoon on Blu-ray. Just curious, what do you think of it? And I have to ask, do you recommend I watch the sequel? Also, Letter of Mine, coming soon." Moats and Saban said, "So sorry, I meant Rob. You don't have to feel bad." People always, when there's two people together, it's a brain thing. I understand. I love Cocoon. I think Cocoon's a great film. I love everything about it. And obviously, we lost Brian Dennehy recently. I think Cocoon's a great movie. The sequel's okay. The problem is these movies were successful and they make the sequel, and it's fine. But it's not the first movie. You could watch it. I always like to watch these sequels because they're interesting. And you see, how do they carry the story forward? That's really what I'm curious about. J Hart RIC says open carry doesn't diminish the First Amendment. I don't think it does either, but I just think, look, America we come out of the Old West. I mean, open carry. I think when anyone is carrying a deadly weapon of any kind, I think it creates an unease in people. I know that knowing somebody who's not, you don't know how, when someone's carrying, you don't know their level of skill. You don't know them as people, and there's no guarantees because in America anybody can have a gun. And in this day and age, I'm speaking now. I'm just talking about, is it the best thing in the world to do? I mean, I don't know. That's out of my pay grade. But I would just be mindful. It's just like anything else. If you're open carrying in a country where we've had so much gun violence over the last 2 decades, it can be, I think, intimidating to people, and I think we should just be mindful of that. But I think you're right. It doesn't diminish the First Amendment. Calvin Bowes is here and says, I'm tired of people who react to just part of a statement instead of taking everything you read in context. Next time a moron starts bad-mouthing someone for what they said, ask them the context, and if they don't know, they should shut up. I remember them wanting to take John Wayne's name off the airport because of things he had said out of context in a Playboy interview in 1970. It's like Lillian Gish, who because she'd appeared in Birth of a Nation, she was canceled where they Lillian Gish had a long career as a silent film star, and at the time you have to think about where society was when we want to cancel people who literally are from a different time. You have to take into consideration the culture that existed at that time. And a lot of people don't. They don't, and I find that strange. Like, when you go back and you judge, like, would you judge somebody who lived 100 years ago by the same standards of today? I mean, I don't think that's fair because the world was just different. It was just different. So, yeah. And so I agree with you. Jad sent in a super chat. Well, thank you, Jad. You didn't ask a question, though, but I very much appreciate the support of the channel. Mukbang says, just more support. Well, thank you, Mukbang. Love your live chat. Benefit of the doubt. Black Lives Matter. Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with that. Eric Gant sends in a tip. Greetings, Rob. Hoping your film industry experience can help answer a question regarding the film Rock and Rule. The movie has an interesting and solid mix of music, ranging from Debbie Harry to Earth, Wind, and Fire, but no soundtrack album. What gives? I didn't know that. Rock and Rule doesn't have a sound. You know what? Well, hang on. I'll make a phone call. Make a phone call. Let's see. I don't know the answer to this. So, I'm going to call Lucas Kendall and ask him. Lucas Kendall, who is a soundtrack movie producer. He's a movie producer and he's a soundtrack producer as well. He knows more about soundtracks than anybody I know. I'm going to call him and ask him the question because this is a good one and I don't have an answer. He might not be home. He's got 2 daughters. Because I don't have the answer to this. I can't believe there's no soundtrack album for Rock and Roll. Well, he usually picks up quick, so maybe he's doing something.
Hi, you've reached Lucas Kendall on Film Score Monthly. Please.
Film Score Monthly. I'll leave him a message.
At the tone, please record your message. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Hey, Lucas, It's Rob. Eric Gant on my live show is asking about the movie Rock and Rule. And he says the movie has an interesting and solid mix of music ranging from Debbie Harry to Earth, Wind, and Fire, but no soundtrack album. What gives? Do you know that? The status of Rock and Rule's soundtrack? Was there one? Is there one? What happened? And why, if they don't have one, what could the answer be? Well, I could tell you this. From my own experience, music rights in a movie are very tricky because when you're making a movie and you want to put a certain piece of music, like I don't know if those were original compositions that those artists did for the movie. They might be. In which case, it seems silly, but maybe the record companies or the artists could only, part of their deal was they could only put their songs in the movie. When home video first came about, when home video was new, they hadn't negotiated home video rights to music. So when movies would come out in, say, John Carpenter's The Thing, they use Stevie Wonder's Superstition. When Knowles is in the kitchen, he's on his roller skates, and he says, "Somebody put their dirty drawers in the kitchen trash can." He's listening to Stevie Wonder. And when the movie came out originally on home video, they didn't get the rights. When they got the rights to use the song for the movie, they didn't get the rights to use the music on a home video release because they didn't think about it, or they couldn't negotiate it or something. There's a lot of instances. I'm a huge fan of an 80s TV series called Wise Guy that Stephen Cannell produced, and they did a whole a record label, the Dead Dog Records arc, it's called. And they have a lot of music in that, and they've never been able to release the series on home video because, well, they've released Wise Guy, but that arc, the Dead Dog Records arc, one of them, they could not release because they didn't have the music rights. Miami Vice, the original Miami Vice, it took a long time to come to home video because of music rights. So they might not have had the rights. You know, I would assume if there's really no soundtrack album, that's probably the reason why. So, Eric, that is, I don't know if that's true, but I would assume it might be the case. Mukbang sends in another super chat. It says, live chat says Willow has a birthday on the 12th, but this is not confirmed. Any info, we will celebrate. We will celebrate Willow. Well, if Willow's having a birthday, we should have a Zoom party, another Zoom party. That was a good one. That was a successful Zoom party. And we should all get together and make Willow bring her mom onto the Zoom party. And Willow also has to get a light to illuminate her lovely face so we can actually see more of her. Chuck Philpott sends in a super chat. Thank you, sir. I love saying your last name. Just want to say hi. Hope the rest of Saturday is a good one. Love my Blues Brothers 4K. I also pre-ordered Flash Gordon. I can't wait. Hassan sends in a tip and says, so they were hurt by a couple of fuck yous on Twitter, but they believe they can change America. That's why others call them snowflakes. Your peers wouldn't last a minute in Mexico. And I mean the real one, not fucking Cancun. Hassan, you made my day with that. Yeah. I mean, what's funny is I think we all talk about privilege here in America. I mean, one, I think the first privilege is that we're alive because of obviously the thermodynamic miracle of life that Dr. Manhattan talks about. But, you know, it's always where we can never forget where we are. You know, we are in one of the richest countries the world has ever seen. And to live in America at all is in itself a privilege. I was glad I was born here as opposed to, say, somewhere else. But, that's funny. Wouldn't last in Mexico. And I mean the real one, not fucking Cancun. Amen, Hassan. That's very funny. Chuck Philpott also says, Flash Gordon has the best movie soundtrack. I love the episode of CW's Flash where they put music from the movie in it. It was great. That was great. I love that. My friend Eric Wallace is the showrunner. I should ask him. I should have him come on the show and talk to him. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of Robservations episode 435, and we are going to be doing Whining About Movies at 7 o'clock tonight. Not 6, but 7 o'clock. And we'll be back. Elizabeth, the ace, the arbiter of cinematic excellence, will be back. I'm going to get her liquored up, and we're going to come on the show, and it's going to be just as spicy as it was for our Brick show. And Elizabeth loves The Princess Bride. And So there we go. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank the generous, all of you who are so generous with your time, with your letters. Thank you for supporting the channel financially, whether it's via super chats or tips. I very much appreciate that. And thanks for continuing here with me on our journey that we've taken. Well, tomorrow will be show 436. So thank you very much. And I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank, of course, Mike Bodden, Detective Jim Boyers, his wife Heidi, Greg Smith, Louis Yu, Jordy Lyons, and the Richard. And you can find the Richard over at the Whining About Movies Facebook page or the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page. And so I will be back tomorrow, and I will tell you right now that every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I say always, have a better day.